Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Joined the UA Staff Group Chat. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. God had created a group chat and added several members, including Midnight, Eraserhead, Vlad King, Snipe, and others. God greeted everyone, but Always Tired expressed their reluctance to engage. Screech, however, was excited and playfully changed Always Tired's name to Die for Coffee, while Bendover changed Screech's name to Mike Wazowski. Mike Wazowski was quick to react, and Die for Coffee lamented their tiredness. God explained the purpose of the chat, which was to share information and connect with each other. Skinny Buff enthusiastically joined the conversation, declaring their presence and support for the idea. As the chat continued, I Crave Sleep questioned their presence, and God reiterated that all staff members were required to be there. Winglang and Flamethrower joined the conversation, curious about their inclusion. God humorously admitted to adding an unknown member by accident, prompting I Crave Sleep to suggest removing them. Bendover decided to address the newcomer, Broccoli Bun, while others chimed in to welcome them. Broccoli Bun expressed confusion about being in an unknown group chat, and Bendover complimented their politeness. God inquired about Broccoli Bun's identity, but they hesitated to reveal it, recognizing the potential risks of sharing personal information. Broccoli Bun then excitedly recognized the presence of several well-known heroes in the chat, including present Mike and Midnight, leading to a flurry of reactions from the other members. They explained how they deduced the identities based on previous messages and usernames. God was intrigued by Broccoli Bun's insights and asked for their age, but Broccoli Bun cleverly avoided the question, sensing a challenge. They expressed their disbelief at being part of the UA's staff chat, impressing the others with their knowledge of the heroes. As the conversation progressed, Broccoli Bun identified each member's username, showcasing their knowledge and enthusiasm. Their excitement was contagious, and even 13 was touched by the compliments, leading to a heartfelt moment in the chat. Broccoli Bun reassured 13 that they were valued, even if they felt unworthy. The chat continued with supportive exchanges, and Broccoli Bun confirmed they were doing well, bringing a sense of camaraderie to the group. Thank you for asking, Hound Dog. Broccoli Bun expressed excitement about speaking to Recovery Girl, praising her selfless help and powerful healing abilities. Broccoli Bun admired Recovery Girl as a true hero and felt a deep respect for her. Recovery Girl responded with gratitude, feeling flattered by the compliment. God inquired about the meaning of a physical healer. Broccoli Bun explained that some individuals possess quirks that aid in cellular regeneration, which requires projecting their own energy into the patient. However, Recovery Girl's healing is efficient and requires minimal effort, making her an invaluable asset in emergencies. Broccoli Bun considered her the most valuable player among the heroes, alongside Eraserhead. God acknowledged the insightful analysis. Recovery Girl felt honored by the recognition. God then asked why Eraserhead was considered the MVP. Broccoli Bun enthusiastically declared Eraserhead to be the best hero, highlighting his quirk of erasure, which temporarily disadvantages enemies. This strategy allows others to take control of the battle. Broccoli Bun noted that Eraserhead's ability to hold dangerous quirks at bay makes it easier to defeat opponents, despite his own challenges, such as dry eyes and the need for protection while using his quirk. Broccoli Bun admired Eraserhead's resourcefulness in creating a specialized capture weapon, his scarf, which is made from a strong material. Broccoli Bun was in awe of Eraserhead's fighting style, noting his fluid movements and martial arts proficiency, which made him a formidable opponent. Broccoli Bun believed that if Eraserhead were not an underground hero, he would likely be the #1 hero. Broccoli Bun shared that being a hero is about having the heart of one, rather than just flashy quirks. Skills and passion are what truly resonate with people. Although many are unaware of Eraserhead's true capabilities, Broccoli Bun firmly believed he was the best hero in a millennium. Broccoli Bun suggested to Powerloader the idea of crossing nylon strings with carbon polymers to enhance Eraserhead's scarf, making it more resistant to strength-enhancing quirks. The conversation continued with various reactions from the group, with I Crave Sleep expressing disbelief at Broccoli Bun's age. Broccoli Bun's excitement grew as they realized they were being adopted by I Crave Sleep, who requested the necessary paperwork. Broccoli Bun playfully mentioned that they would need to fight their mother in court, who was known to be a fierce advocate against quirk discrimination. God confirmed the mother's reputation, acknowledging her strength in legal matters. Broccoli Bun was thrilled at the prospect of being adopted, while I Crave Sleep assured them of their new familial bond. The group shared laughter and camaraderie, with Broccoli Bun feeling grateful for the newfound friendships. As the conversation unfolded, Broccoli Bun revealed their past struggles with friendship, expressing that they had not had a friend since they were 4 years old. This revelation prompted a wave of support from the group, with I Crave Sleep declaring their intention to adopt Broccoli Bun and protect them fiercely. The atmosphere was filled with warmth and encouragement as everyone embraced their roles in this new family dynamic. Broccoli Bun felt overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, realizing they had found a supportive community. The group continued to bond, exchanging playful banter and affectionate nicknames, solidifying their connections. Each member expressed their excitement about the new friendships and the adventures that lay ahead. Dare. Shoot expressed a desire for a name as well, and Kitten changed Shoot's name to Wild Wild West. Wild Wild West shared their fondness for the new kid. Clones inquired if the name was theirs, and Kitten changed Clone's name to Shadow Clone Jujitsu. Shadow Clone Jujitsu felt relieved. Kitten enthusiastically complimented Ectoplasm San's quirk and asked a few questions about it, hoping to discuss them later if Ectoplasm San was comfortable. Skinny Buff announced their return, expressing how much they missed the conversation and planned to catch up on previous messages. God reminded Izuku that he had correctly guessed All Might's name based on his username while ignoring the reason behind it, prompting curiosity about how Izuku had figured it out. Kitten explained that since God had specifically asked about All Might's name in a group chat, it was safe to assume everyone already knew. Dadzuwa was surprised by this knowledge. Kitten confirmed that if that referred to one for all, then yes, they were aware. God found this intriguing and wanted to know how Kitten had learned about it. Listener pointed out that it was likely the most well-kept secret in the world, to which Kitten replied that All Might had told them directly. Skinny Buff, having caught up on previous messages, expressed disbelief and questioned the trustworthiness of a random fanboy. Dadzuwa, feeling protective, asked what had happened to his son. Kitten reminded Skinny Buff that leaving a suicidal kid on a rooftop after crushing his dreams was not wise. Skinny Buff admitted confusion, while Dadzuwa pressed for details about what had transpired. Ravenkiller jokingly asked if they needed to sharpen their katana, and Listener inquired about the katana while also asking if they needed to burst some eardrums. God asked Izuku to elaborate on the situation. Kitten recounted being attacked by the sludge villain one evening and waking up to All Might trying to wake them. They had wanted to ask All Might a question, but during their flight, All Might had asked them to let go. They landed on a rooftop, and just as Kitten was about to ask their question, All Might began to emit smoke and deflate, leading to an explanation. Skinny Buff realized Kitten was the kid from the rooftop incident. Dadzuwa confronted All Might about the situation, expressing his anger and concern for his son. God also wanted to know about Kitten's mental state. Kitten opened up about their struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts due to bullying in middle school. They had hoped All Might would have an answer to whether one could be a hero without a quirk, but the truth had been painful. Kitten had even contemplated jumping from the rooftop but ultimately thought of their mother and chose not to. Dadzuwa remained silent, processing the information. Wild Wild West changed Skinny Buff's name to Target Practice. Kiss Kiss criticized All Might for his actions, listing reasons why he should be held accountable. Dadzuwa reiterated that All Might was in serious trouble. Target Practice acknowledged his mistake and sincerely apologized to Izuku. Kitten insisted on being called Izuku and confronted All Might about his hypocrisy, pointing out that he had once been quirkless too and had been given his quirk out of his desire to become a hero. Kitten expressed disappointment in All Might for crushing their dreams. Target Practice remained silent, while Winglang commented on All Might's behavior. Badass Block mentioned seeing Mike and Midnight restraining Aizawa, who looked furious. Target Practice asked Izuku if there was anything he could do to earn forgiveness. Dadzawa demanded that All Might stay away from his son. God acknowledged All Might's irresponsibility and suggested he see Hound Dog weekly to work on his morals. Shadow Clone Jujutsu felt that the consequences were not enough but accepted it for now, asking Izuku for his thoughts. Kitten expressed that there was no personal grudge, only disappointment and anger, and reiterated that everyone could call him Izuku except for All Might and Endeavor. Target Practice remained silent. Raven Killer found Izuku's purity refreshing. God expressed a desire to meet Izuku, and Kitten was taken aback but excitedly agreed, noting that visiting UA had always been a dream. Food joined the conversation, expressing admiration for Izuku and asking about his favorite food. Kitten excitedly responded that it was Katsudon. Kitten then changed Food's name to Angel Feeder. Tony Stark noted that Lunch Rush was visibly emotional. Angel Feeder thanked Izuku, who felt pleased. Winglang, eager to join in, asked for a name as well, and Kitten changed Winglang's name to Emperor Nugget. Emperor Nugget declared a willingness to fight for Izuku, while Dadzawa humorously remarked on the futility of that endeavor. Space Ruler mentioned that everyone wanted a name from Izuku, and Kitten happily agreed to name them all. Kitten had changed Space Ruler's name to Void. Kitten then changed God's name to Rat Satan. Rat Satan acknowledged the change with a playful expression. Void declared that he would cherish his new name forever. Kiss remarked that Void was spot on about Nizu, and Listener and Shadow Clone Jujutsu agreed. Kitten changed Drax's name to Bloodlord, who admitted that the kid was smart. Kitten expressed delight at the change. Then, Kitten changed Kiss's name to Goddess, who felt flattered by the new title. Rat Satan questioned why she was called the Goddess, to which Kitten replied that only she could put him in his place. Dadzawa, observing the conversation, noted that he had one more reason to adopt Kitten. Kitten changed Tony Stark's name to Support King, who excitedly declared his intention to compete for Kitten's adoption. Dadzawa responded with a smile, while Support King insisted he wouldn't back down. Kitten changed Target Practice's name to I Am Here. I Am Here expressed gratitude to young Midoriya for the name. Raven Killer interjected, suggesting that he didn't deserve such a name. Dadzawa inquired why Kitten respected I Am Here despite his past actions. Kitten explained that, although he disliked I Am Here for what he had done, he respected him for saving many lives. Badass Block noted that I Am Here was crying. I Am Here then expressed a desire to earn young Midoriya's forgiveness and asked what he should do. Kitten, momentarily silent, then changed Wolf's name to Mind Healer. Listener pointed out that I Am Here had ignored All Might, while Raven Killer proudly declared him to be her nephew. Mind Healer thanked the pup, and Kitten expressed joy. Kitten changed TF's name to Liar, and Void remarked that it was a cool name that Liar would appreciate. Kitten then changed Flamethrower's name to Abuser. Rat Satan called out to Izuku, and Dadzawa addressed Kitten, asking why she was still awake past 11. Kitten admitted she couldn't sleep, prompting Dadzawa to encourage her to rest for her future as a hero. Kitten expressed her love for Dadzawa, who wished her a good night. Kitten returned the sentiment, bidding good night to everyone in the chat. As the night wrapped up, Rat Satan, Void, and others wished their good nights. The next morning, Dadzawa greeted Kitten and asked if she had slept well. Raven Killer teased Dadzawa for being fatherly, while Listener praised him for being sweet. Badass Block greeted Izuku, and Goddess scolded everyone for waking Kitten so early. Kitten greeted everyone cheerfully, explaining that she woke up early to work out. Dadzawa questioned why she was up so early, and Goddess advised her to get more sleep. Kitten explained that she was a light sleeper and struggled to fall back asleep. Raven Killer found her adorable, and Rat Satan greeted her, asking if she could visit UA the next day. Kitten eagerly agreed, and Void announced he would visit as well. As the conversation continued, Rat Satan playfully described Izuku as looking like broccoli, which Raven Killer found amusing. Kitten accepted the nickname Green Bean, and Dadzawa reluctantly allowed it. The group continued to suggest various nicknames, each one more endearing than the last. Green Bean then shared that they owned a cafe called Nico by Dagoba Beach, where they adopted stray kittens and provided shelter. Dadzawa expressed his determination to gain custody of Kitten, while Rat Satan found the cafe idea interesting. Green Bean promised to chat later before leaving for the cafe. In a private chat with Hawks, Nugget greeted him. Hawks responded warmly, asking if Nugget had something on his mind. Nugget hesitated, revealing that he knew about Hawks' struggles with the Hero Commission. He shared his own experiences with bullying and panic attacks, expressing empathy for what Hawks had been through. Nugget reassured Hawks that he was not alone and that he understood the pain of keeping emotions bottled up. Sold to the Hero Commission because of a powerful quirk, Nugget understood the struggles faced by others. He expressed his awareness of the challenges they endured and shared his own feelings of loneliness. He didn't want anyone to feel isolated, especially when he knew how it felt to pretend to be happy while hiding pain. He offered his support, making it clear that he would always be there to listen. Emperor Nugget reached out, asking to meet, and Nugget agreed to meet at Dagoba Beach. As Izuku smiled at the screen, he put on a hoodie and walked out of his room. He informed his mother that he was heading to the beach, receiving her warm encouragement to stay safe. Once at the beach, he wrapped the jacket around his waist and settled on a large rock. Despite his cute appearance with unruly curly green hair and reddish cheeks adorned with faint freckles, he had developed a strong physique from months of cleaning the very beach he sat upon. The sound of flapping wings drew his attention, and he spotted a familiar figure landing nearby. With a smile, Izuku waved at Hawks, who quickly tackled him in an emotional embrace, tears streaming down his cheeks. Izuku felt a sense of empathy for Hawks, knowing that everyone needed comfort, regardless of age. He had learned early on that not everyone was treated equally, and he wished for no one to endure pain alone. He expressed his regret for not acting sooner to help Hawks, revealing that he had discovered the truth about the Hero Commission when he was just 10. He had wanted to reach out, but as a quirkless child he felt unheard. Despite the obstacles, he was grateful for the chance to finally meet Hawks and believed he could help him. Hawks stared at Izuku with wide eyes, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Izuku grew anxious, fearing he might have offended him. He quickly reassured Hawks that he didn't mean to imply he needed saving, especially not from someone without a quirk. Hawks hugged him tightly, his breath shaky. Izuku returned the embrace, burying his face in Hawks' shoulder. He understood the older hero's need for affection and was more than willing to provide the comfort he craved. With a smile, Hawks playfully teased Izuku about how adorable he was, calling him broccoli. Izuku pouted but couldn't help giggling at the nickname. Hawks, content, sat down on the rock and wrapped a wing around Izuku, declaring him his little brother. Izuku was taken aback by the sudden declaration, but Hawks pinched his cheeks affectionately, reaffirming their bond. Izuku playfully acknowledged Hawks as Kigo and I, prompting Hawks to ask how he knew his name. Izuku giggled, explaining that he had spent his time analyzing heroes and their quirks, even developing skills in hacking. Hawks was amused by Izuku's talents and was impressed when Izuku mentioned he had hacked into the Hero Commission server. They shared a laugh as Izuku recounted his experience hacking into UA, revealing it had been a clever trick. As they continued to bond, Hawks offered to take Izuku flying. The excitement lit up Izuku's eyes as he eagerly accepted. Once in the air, Izuku held on tightly as Hawks soared through the clouds, enjoying the breathtaking view of nature below. Izuku expressed his gratitude, stating that it was the best day of his life, and reminded Hawks that brothers don't thank each other. A few moments later, Hawks asked to see Izuku's analyses, impressed by his insights. Izuku nervously agreed, and as he shared his notes, Hawks was astonished by the depth of Izuku's understanding. Hawks realized how fortunate he was to have Izuku as his brother, knowing that if he had been a villain, the world would have faced dire consequences. The bond they were forming was something special, and Izuku's brilliance shone through in every analysis he shared. Hawks expressed his surprise, exclaiming that the analysis was incredible. He admitted it was a bit scary and creepy but praised its unbelievable detail, struggling to find the right words to convey his admiration. The greenette looked at Hawks with wide eyes filled with surprise, questioning whether Hawks truly thought it was impressive and not villainous. Hawks quickly dismissed any negative opinions, asking who had said such things. The young hero hesitated, explaining that he rarely shared his analyses due to past reactions and a lack of interest from others. Hawks regarded the teen thoughtfully, feeling a moment of hesitation. He asked if he could share the analysis with Nizu, clarifying that he only wanted to show his own part, and only if it was all right with Izuku. The greenette pondered for a moment, expressing his willingness but worrying about how Nizu would react, given the trust placed in him by others. Hawks interrupted Izuku's anxious thoughts, calling out to him with a playful tone. Izuku realized he had been mumbling again, and Hawks chuckled, asking if he often did that. Izuku sheepishly admitted it was a family trait he was trying to overcome. Hawks laughed and pulled Izuku closer with his wing, complimenting him on his cuteness. He then mentioned he had to leave for patrol, promising to see Izuku at UA. Izuku expressed his enjoyment in meeting Hawks and asked if he could talk about him with other pro heroes. Hawks agreed, smiling, and flew away, quietly vowing to protect Izuku. In a new chat, Izuku shared news with his friends. He informed them that he had met his little brother, referring to Hawks as Nugget. His friend Dadzawa reacted with concern, questioning if everything was all right. Izuku reassured him that Nugget was fine, explaining that Hawks understood him better than anyone else. Izuku declared his promise to protect his newfound brother, prompting Dadzawa to insist he better keep that promise. Rat Satan expressed interest in the details of what had happened, and Izuku mentioned that he would share more later, sending an attachment of his analysis. Dadzawa was surprised by the analysis, while Rat Satan praised Izuku's remarkable skills. Izuku expressed his shock at how accurate it was, suggesting that if Izuku were a villain, society would be in chaos. Dadzawa confirmed his pride in Izuku's work and expressed concern for his well-being, noting that he had been bullied in the past. Izuku shared that he had noticed some faded scars and burn marks on his skin but hadn't asked about them because Izuku seemed happy. Dadzawa suggested taking action with the Hero Commission and planned to speak with Izuku when he visited UA the next day. Izuku ended the conversation, calling his brother adorable and referring to him affectionately. Meanwhile, Aizawa Shoyuta, known for his stoic demeanor, surprised his students by showing anger over something he read on his phone. Ida Tenya, the diligent class representative, inquired about Aizawa's well-being. Aizawa looked up, his frown softening as he assured Ida that he was all right. Though Aizawa never played favorites, he had a soft spot for Ida, recognizing him as an ideal student with a formidable quirk and a sensible mind. Next in his thoughts was Tsuyu Azui, a calm and collected student who stood out among the rest. She was hard-working and intelligent, clever enough to use her quirk to her advantage in any situation. Her logical perspective greatly pleased the elder. The third student was Yayorozu Momo. Despite coming from a wealthy family, she was remarkably down-to-earth. Her intelligence was impressive, likely a necessity for effectively utilizing her quirk. The dark-haired girl consistently topped every test and possessed a remarkable quirk, creation. Yet, she seemed to struggle with the confidence to use it fully. Aizawa was determined to help her, believing she could become an incredible hero with her kind nature. Momo expressed her concern for Aizawa, noticing his troubled demeanor. He insisted he was fine and urged her to return to her work, but she couldn't help but feel it was a waste of potential. Aizawa recognized the voice that had spoken those words. It belonged to Bakugo Katsuki, the explosive blonde from Class 1A. Many feared him, but few respected him. The homeroom teacher would agree that Bakugo was born with one of the most powerful quirks, explosion. However, as his adorable little green student often reminded him, being a hero wasn't just about having flashy abilities, it was about having the heart of one, and Bakugo barely met that standard. In simpler terms, Katsuki was a bully with severe anger issues, much like his volatile explosions. Aizawa would prefer to deal with an overly extroverted loudmouth, like Yamada Hizashi, rather than try to manage the explosive blonde. Aizawa himself was more of a cat person, or rather, a cat man, embodying the essence of one. He commanded silence and ordered the students back to their work, his eyes glowing crimson and his dark hair floating, giving him an imposing presence. With a sigh, he returned to scrolling through the messages, reviewing the analysis that the greenette had made about him. Once again, he felt a chill from the level of detail. Meanwhile, Ishido Mina trembled in her seat, whispering to her invisible friend, Hagakure Toru, about Aizawa being affected by an emotions quirk. Aizawa thought about meeting his kitten the next day, and the thought brought a smile to his face. His students were convinced that their beloved teacher was possessed. Aizawa's phone buzzed with messages from the staff chat, where chaos reigned in his absence. The conversation was filled with playful banter and protective sentiments towards Todoroki, which made Aizawa smirk. When class ended, Aizawa called Todoroki to stay behind. The boy nodded, seemingly unfazed by Aizawa's intense gaze, which softened when their eyes met. The other students watched, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. After class, Aizawa gestured for Todoroki to sit down on the first bench. He placed a hand on the teen's shoulder and sighed, asking if Endeavor was abusing him. The shock in Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes revealed a flicker of hope amidst his despair. Aizawa crouched down to meet his gaze, reassuring him that he didn't have to be afraid and inquiring about his home life. Todoroki hesitated, questioning why Aizawa was asking. The elder sighed heavily and explained that he had received information suggesting Endeavor was abusive. He noted Todoroki's distant demeanor and admitted he had a hunch about the situation. Todoroki remained calm, staring at the bench as he asked what would happen if it were true. Aizawa assured him he didn't have to face this alone and offered to take action if he wanted. Curious, Todoroki asked how Aizawa knew about the situation. Aizawa rubbed his eyes and mentioned that someone had dropped hints. When Todoroki pressed for details, Aizawa pulled out his phone to show a chat where Izuku had renamed Endeavor. Todoroki's eyes widened in surprise, and he asked who had shared this information. Aizawa replied that it was his son. Todoroki was taken aback, asking if Aizawa truly had a son. Aizawa clarified that he wished to adopt Izuku, but this information would remain confidential. Todoroki nodded in understanding, and Aizawa stood up, surprising him with a sudden hug. Todoroki flinched at first, but Aizawa gently patted his hair, promising to help him. Tears filled Shudo's eyes as he embraced Aizawa, burying his head in the man's torso. He shared the details of his life, and he had never seen his sensei look so furious before. Aizawa assured him that he would ensure his safety and urged him to trust him. Shuto nodded, feeling a sense of relief that someone finally understood his pain after all these years. A slight frown appeared on his face as he asked if he could meet Aizawa's son. Aizawa smiled at the thought of Shudo referring to his son as your son, and informed him that his son would be visiting UA the following day, allowing Shudo the chance to meet him. The next day, a group chat was created, and Kitten, who was Shudo, greeted everyone cheerfully. Rat Satan and Dadzawa responded warmly, and Kitten expressed a desire to share something important. They discussed Hawks, and Kitten questioned why no one had helped him despite his suffering. Dadzawa apologized, explaining that they had only recently learned about the situation and were doing their best to assist. Rat Satan acknowledged Kitten's feelings for Hawks but urged him to trust them. Kitten affirmed his trust, confident that Aizawa would help Kigo. As the conversation continued, Rat Satan inquired if Kitten was aware that Hawks had presented one of his analyses to them. Kitten felt embarrassed but was pleased to hear that Dadzawa found it impressive, even better than that of an expert. Rat Satan expressed interest in seeing more of Kitten's work the next day, and Kitten eagerly agreed to bring it along. Dadzawa asked how many heroes Kitten had analyzed, and Kitten proudly mentioned having 13 books, with around 10 heroes in each, making it approximately 70 heroes in total. Dadzawa was astonished by Kitten's accomplishments, especially at such a young age. Kitten explained that he had graduated online in just 6 months due to his intelligence, which allowed him to skip years of schooling. Rat Satan expressed excitement about meeting Kitten the next day, and Kitten confirmed he would be there. As the day progressed, Kitten checked in with the UA staff chat, greeting everyone and confirming his visit around 11. Dadzawa and others expressed their eagerness to meet him, and Ravenkiller offered to pick him up. Kitten reassured them that he could manage the journey alone, though Dadzawa suggested having Hawks escort him. The playful banter continued, with everyone looking forward to the meeting. Izuku smiled as he tucked his phone away, feeling grateful for the support of the non-famous heroes. He was excited about attending UA, his dream school, but realized he hadn't informed his mother yet. Approaching his mother, Midoriya Inko, he noticed her transformation over the years. She had become more toned and confident. When he shared the news about his plans and the group chat, Inko was shocked but proud, especially that Aizawa was interested in her son. She hugged him tightly, expressing her pride in him. After their heartfelt exchange, Izuku got dressed and headed toward Dagoba Beach, ready for the day ahead. Hawks was already there, gazing at the horizon. As soon as he spotted Izuku, he flew over to envelop the greenette in a warm embrace. He expressed his excitement about how Midnight would react upon seeing Izuku, which caused Izuku to look horrified at the thought. He wondered if he truly looked that unappealing. Hawks, taken aback, quickly reassured him that he looked adorable, almost blindingly so. Izuku giggled, recalling how his mother always said he was a cute kid. With Izuku on his back, Hawks took off towards UA and landed in the courtyard. He informed Izuku that he had to go on patrol but promised to wait for someone to come and get him. Izuku assured him that he would manage on his own, but Hawks insisted otherwise and pulled out his phone to text the group. In the UA staff chat, Support King complained about the chaos in his lab, mentioning how it kept getting blown up. Badass Block chimed in, expressing his frustration about having to fix Majima's lab daily, despite teaching literature. Wild Wild West noted that at least Badass Block had someone who knew what she was doing, while he was stuck with a class full of students who seemed clueless. Rat Satan reminded Snipe to refrain from speaking ill of his students and suggested that Cementos might feel better with a raise. Badass Block questioned the sincerity of those words, and Dadzawa pointed out that Nizu would not grant raises for such minor issues. The chat buzzed with excitement as Listener expressed eagerness to meet Izuku, and Raven Killer echoed that sentiment. Dadzawa warned everyone to keep their distance from his son, while Listener encouraged Nem to stop being dramatic. The conversation continued with playful banter until Emperor Nugget announced that he had arrived at the gate with Nugget and needed someone to help bring him in, but soon after, everyone else went offline. 13 arrived shortly after, having no classes at UA, despite the initial debate about who would meet the green-haired boy first. As expected, Izuku was in awe of the hero, causing 13 to blush beneath their bulky astronaut suit. 13 guided Izuku to Nizu's office once they regained composure. Nizu greeted Izuku with a warm smile, already contemplating the amusing idea of world domination brought to you by a bored chimera and a small broccoli. Izuku squealed in delight upon meeting the furry creature, overwhelmed with excitement. Nizu chuckled and conjured a cup of tea seemingly out of thin air, suggesting they bond over some quality tea. Izuku nodded enthusiastically and took a seat, holding the cup in his hands. He remarked that if he didn't know Nizu's quirk was high specs, he would have guessed it was the ability to materialize teacups. Nizu grinned and inquired if Izuku had an analysis of his quirk. When Izuku nodded, Nizu laughed, impressed by his keen observations. He expressed eagerness to see Izuku's analyses. Izuku felt honored to share his work, though he hesitated, unsure if it would meet Nizu's expectations. Nizu dismissed his concerns, praising Izuku's analytical skills, especially given his age. Izuku laughed nervously as he retrieved his books from his bag and placed them on Nizu's table. Nizu's eyes sparkled with interest as he picked up one of the crayon books and began to read. Izuku let out an adorable squeak, reminiscent of a baby mouse, as he realized Nizu was actually reading one of his creations. Nizu's eyes widened in surprise as he finished skimming through the book. Nizu complimented Izuku's remarkable skills, noting that even as a child, his observations were spot on. Izuku beamed at the praise, while Nizu regretted not having sunglasses to hide his admiration. However, expression shifted when he noticed a damaged book among the others. Nizu inquired about the condition of the book, and Izuku froze, sensing the tension. Nizu pointed out that while the other books were well maintained, this one appeared to have been damaged by external forces, likely from bullying. Izuku's pale face confirmed Nizu's suspicions. Izuku stammered, unsure how to respond without raising more questions. Nizu felt a surge of anger beneath his calm demeanor, concerned for his future student. He reassured Izuku that he didn't have to answer if he didn't want to. Izuku's confidence returned momentarily as he playfully suggested that Nizu would probably seek out information on his own. A moment of silence filled the air as a nervous Izuku stared at a smirking Nizu. The smirk transformed into a cackle, startling ectoplasm, who was about to knock on the door and quickly floated away, muttering to himself. Nizu laughed again, acknowledging Izuku's understanding of his nature. The chimera felt a sense of camaraderie with the boy, convinced that he had found an ally to cause mischief in the world. Nizu reluctantly mentioned that he had a meeting with the Hero Commission, but he knew Izuku would be interested in the details. Izuku perked up at the mention of the commission, grinning with excitement. He asked if he could borrow a few books for further study and if he could schedule another meeting soon. Nizu agreed, pleased to see Izuku so enthusiastic. Izuku eagerly offered 3 of his recent books, excited to share his detailed analyses. Nizu accepted the books but noticed that Izuku seemed uncomfortable about something. Determined to make the boy feel at ease, Nizu encouraged him to ask anything, assuring him he wouldn't bite. Izuku hesitated, stuttering nervously as he asked if he could touch Nizu's fur. Nizu was taken aback by the question but decided not to object, wanting to make Izuku happy despite his own discomfort with being touched. After a moment of hesitation, Nizu gave his consent. Izuku's eyes lit up as Nizu leaned forward. As soon as Izuku's fingers brushed against the soft fur, he began to massage it gently. Nizu couldn't deny that he enjoyed the sensation. Izuku whispered in awe about how soft it was before pulling his hand away. Nizu straightened up, grinning as he promised to share the secrets of fur grooming in their future meetings. Izuku laughed and stood up, thanking Nizu for the meeting and expressing his honor at having met him. Nizu assured him that the pleasure was all his and looked forward to their next encounter. As Izuku exited the office, Nizu rubbed his head where Izuku had touched him, reflecting on the strange warmth he felt in his chest. He wondered if perhaps he had a bit of a cat-like nature after all. Izuku met the teachers one by one, successfully giving All Might a cold shoulder. No one noticed how the poor skinny guy pouted in disappointment, not that it would have made any difference since everyone was preoccupied with their own plans. Power Loader was determined to keep the adorable green-haired boy away from his favorite pink-haired colleague. Midnight was overwhelmed by Izuku's cuteness and refused to let him go, insisting that she would take him to her class. Mike let out an excited squeal when Izuku hugged him, a sound that echoed throughout the school. Now, Izuku was waiting in Eraserhead's office, carefully observing the plain interior. The teacher would return in about 10 minutes, as Midnight had estimated. Mike had to drag her away from the room, leaving the poor kid looking somewhat traumatized by her enthusiastic hugs. The blonde led her toward Class 1A and knocked on the door. Aizawa was honestly tired of his class. He was grading their test papers, occasionally stabbing the stack with his pen while the students chatted among themselves. Some were singing a cheerful tune, while others tossed things around. Ida, bless his mechanical soul, was doing his best to maintain order alongside Momo. Fortunately, no one was bothering a certain explosive blonde, and Aizawa silently thanked his luck. He would lose his patience if Bakugu started yelling again. He sighed, rounding off Bakugu's score to 92 out of 100, the fourth highest. Momo had scored 96, Ida 95, and Todoroki he hated how Bakugu had the foulest attitude he had ever seen, yet the kid was a beast in battle like an experienced warrior, one of the best Aizawa had ever encountered. He posted the marks on the sheet and grimaced at the sight of Minetta's paper, which was completely blank. Just as he was about to call out the tiny boy, he heard a knock on the door. Rolling his eyes, he capped his pen and rubbed his eyes, instructing the visitor to enter. The door slid open to reveal an exasperated Mike restraining a protesting Midnight in a playful hold. The students gaped at the scene, some giggling and others whispering theories. Aizawa demanded to know what was happening, his tone stern enough to cease Midnight's antics. She squealed that Izuku had arrived, her excitement palpable. Mike grinned as he released Midnight, who landed on the floor with a small thud. Aizawa rolled his eyes, thinking how dramatic Nemuri could be. He told them it was almost time and that he would visit Izuku now. Mike informed him that Izuku was in his office, causing Aizawa's eyes to widen slightly before he nodded. He dismissed the class, reminding them that their assignments were due on his desk by the next day. Confused heads bobbed in agreement as they filed out of the classroom. As Todoroki approached the teacher, he checked the surroundings and cleared his throat, asking if Izuku was there. Aizawa allowed a small smile to grace his lips and nodded, though he expressed uncertainty about introducing them all of a sudden. He promised to ask Izuku if it was okay, and if he agreed, he would call for Todoroki. Shuto nodded and walked away, his heart racing at the prospect of meeting his savior. Aizawa sighed and locked his classroom before heading toward his office. Placing his hand on the doorknob, he inhaled and turned it, opening the door. Bright green eyes wide with awe met his dark ones, and just like that, Aizawa Shoyuta felt a warmth in his chest. Izuku jumped from his seat, his excitement overflowing as he exclaimed how thrilled he was to finally meet Aizawa. The elder chuckled, his hand instinctively reaching to ruffle the green-haired boy's hair, appreciating its softness. Unlike the other extroverted members of his friend group, Aizawa was not prepared for the enthusiastic hug that Izuku wrapped around him. He froze for a moment, trying to comprehend the situation, before awkwardly patting the teen's back, still in a daze. Aizawa thought to himself how Izuku truly was like a kitten, and the spark in the boy's eyes only confirmed it. Izuku giggled, a sound so charming that it made Aizawa pause. He sighed and placed his belongings on the table before turning his attention back to the boy. He awkwardly asked if Izuku had eaten anything, unsure how to engage in casual conversation with someone so lively. Izuku responded cheerfully, saying that lunch rush had made him katsudan. Aizawa smiled and asked if Izuku would mind meeting Todoroki Shuto, who wanted to meet him. Izuku's eyes lit up at the prospect of making a new friend, and he eagerly agreed. Aizawa mused about how bright Izuku was and took out his phone to call the class representative, Ida, asking him to bring Todoroki to his office. Meanwhile, in the common room, Ida complied sincerely with Aizawa's request, chopping the air before disconnecting the call. Mina, curious, asked what Sensei wanted. Ida informed her that Todoroki needed to go to Aizawa's office immediately. Todoroki nodded, standing up and gathering his jacket, ready to meet Izuku. Kaminari tilted his head toward the dual quirk user, his brows furrowing in curiosity. He recalled that their teacher had asked Shuto to stay back after class the previous day. Shuto nodded, acknowledging the tension from yesterday. Jairu, twirling her ear jacks, asked if anything had happened. Shuto explained that their teacher had come across some news about Endeavor and had requested his presence. A collective "oh" filled the room just as a certain blonde shouted for the remote, causing another commotion. Shuto sighed and slipped out of the chaotic dorms, making his way to Eraserhead's office to meet this intriguing character. Inside the office, Aizawa expressed his admiration for Izuku's analysis of him, feeling a mix of awe and intimidation. Izuku's eyes sparkled with excitement at the compliment, while Aizawa, not used to such brightness, struggled to respond. The sound of knocking interrupted them, and Aizawa guessed it was Shuto. He invited him in, and Izuku tensed, aware of his own hesitations about friendships, especially after his difficult relationship with Katsuki. Todoroki entered the room, his gaze first landing on Aizawa and then on the enthusiastic brunette. He thought to himself that Izuku was just too bright. Aizawa stood up and leaned against the table, introducing Todoroki as his son. Izuku's mouth formed an O shape in surprise while Todoroki fought back a chuckle. Todoroki introduced himself in his usual monotone, and Izuku, beaming, extended his hand in friendship. Aizawa excused himself to fetch snacks, leaving the two boys to get to know each other. Izuku nervously asked how Shuto was doing, to which Shuto's piercing gaze softened as he expressed his gratitude for Izuku's support. He shared how he had never opened up about his life before and how it had weighed on him. Because of Izuku, he felt a sense of relief knowing someone understood him. Izuku, touched by Shuto's words, pulled him into a warm hug. Shuto was taken aback but soon relaxed as he felt Izuku's comforting presence. Izuku insisted that there was no need for thanks, declaring Shuto as his friend. Aizawa returned with a tray of snacks, surprised to see Shuto smiling and engaging with Izuku. He placed the tray on the table, prompting Izuku to excitedly share details about Shuto's quirk, marveling at the possibilities it offered. Aizawa and Shuto exchanged concerned glances as Izuku's enthusiasm led him to mumble rapidly, prompting Aizawa to gently shake him back to reality. Izuku sheepishly acknowledged his tendency to ramble, and Aizawa reassured him that it was endearing. Izuku's grin lit up the room, and Shuto blinked in surprise at Aizawa's rare compliment. The trio enjoyed a comfortable silence while snacking, with Izuku occasionally sharing amusing anecdotes about their principal, Nizu. As the time passed, Izuku suddenly panicked, realizing he needed to head home. He apologized, explaining that his mother would be worried. Aizawa offered to walk him home, but Izuku hesitated, feeling that he could manage on his own. However, Shuto insisted that it was late and that Aizawa should accompany him. Despite Izuku's protests, he found himself walking out of the campus with Shuto by his side. As they approached the gates, Shuto felt relieved that the dorms were on the other side, sparing him from explaining his presence to his noisy classmates. He wanted to ask Izuku about his quirk but realized he had forgotten to do so amidst his thoughts. Shuto called out to Izuku, who was lost in his own excitement about being at UA and making a new friend. "Oh my god, Mom's going to go crazy." Izuku had just met all the pro heroes. He answered, embarrassed by his lack of attention, and wondered what Shuto was asking. The question caught him off guard. He stopped in his tracks, and Shuto's eyes widened slightly, a mix of shock and concern swirling in Izuku's gaze. He worried he might have offended the Greenette or that Izuku hated his quirk like Shuto hated his fire. "I'm sorry if that was insensitive of me," Shuto said, trying to ease the tension. Izuku shook his head and took a deep breath. If he wanted to be friends with someone, he needed to be honest. If Shuto stayed even after learning about his quirklessness, then maybe he had found a true friend. "It's okay. I just wasn't expecting that." He shifted uncomfortably. The last time he revealed his quirklessness to the pros, he had been confident because it was in a group chat. He didn't have to look them in the eye and say he was quirkless, nor did he have to see their reactions. Now, telling someone he had come to view as a friend was unnerving. "You don't have to tell me if you're uncomfortable with it," Shuto offered, trying to ease Izuku's nervousness. "I'm quirkless," Izuku admitted. He peeked through one eye, retreating into himself, expecting a scowl of disgust on Shuto's face. To his surprise, Shuto's brows shot up in astonishment, which was oddly funny to see. "Quirkless? As in, you don't have a quirk?" If it had been someone else, Izuku might have sassed them for being so obvious. "Why, he confirmed. "Cool," Shuto mumbled, and Izuku could tell he was being sincere. "You're not disgusted?" Izuku asked warily, feeling like a freak. Shuto felt a surge of anger towards those who had made Izuku feel this way. He had never felt such rage towards anyone other than Endeavor. Sure, he had wanted to freeze Bakugo in annoyance, but this was different. "What are you talking about? I'm not disgusted, and you most certainly aren't a freak," Shuto reassured him. "Oh," Izuku mumbled, happiness evident in his voice. "Thanks, Shuto-kun." Shuto noticed Izuku tearing up slightly, but the smile on his face was genuine. He decided not to ask further, not wanting to make him uncomfortable. "Aizawa-san will be arriving soon. You can go back to your dorm, Shuto-kun," Izuku chirped after a moment of silence, returning to his cheerful demeanor. Shuto stayed. 2 minutes later, Shoyuta joined them. Izuku and Shuto exchanged numbers, with Izuku asking Shuto to text him whenever he wanted to talk. Izuku was filled with joy as he thought about the day he had just experienced. Later, in the UA staff chat, excitement buzzed as everyone discussed Izuku's day. Ravenkiller expressed her enthusiasm, wishing she could have walked him home. Listener chimed in, sharing how much he enjoyed spending time with Izuku, who had impressed everyone with his English skills. Support King noted how Izuku had corrected the blueprints made by Hatsum, and Rat Satan remarked on the interesting meeting they had. As the chat continued, everyone greeted Izuku warmly when he logged on. Izuku shared that Aizawa had walked him home and that his mom was cooking katsudon, his favorite dish. The chat erupted with excitement over how adorable Izuku was, and they all expressed their fondness for him. Dadzawa, Aizawa's online persona, playfully told everyone to stop blowing up his phone, while Izuku thanked everyone for their kindness. As the conversation continued, Izuku felt grateful for the support and friendship he had found at UA. He signed off, promising to visit again soon, and left everyone with warm goodbyes. The staff chat buzzed with energy, and even as they joked and teased, it was clear that they all cared deeply for the young hero. Maybe it would be a good idea to reserve a few hours at the cafe so that it's just the group. Having all the pros in one place among the general public could make them vulnerable to attack. Would this Sunday work? Dadzawa agreed, while Badass Block nodded in affirmation. Kitten expressed a wish that Shudo could join them, but lamented that he couldn't due to the dorm system. Ravenkiller noted that Shudo, as in Todoroki Shudo, Endeavor's son, had become a topic of conversation. Listener asked if Kitten had become friends with Shudo, to which Kitten replied enthusiastically. Ravenkiller teased Kitten, calling them pure, while Bloodlord commented on Shudo's stoic demeanor, suggesting he might not understand emotions. Kitten defended Shudo, explaining that he knew what emotions were but struggled to express them. Ravenkiller proposed bringing Shudo along under some pretense, but Dadzawa reminded them that pulling a student out without raising suspicion was not an option. Kitten reassured everyone that they could meet at UA again. Feeling a bit guilty, Shadow Clone Jujutsu chimed in, while Liar Liar announced their timely arrival, greeting Kitten. Kitten excitedly recognized Detective Tsukachi and introduced themselves as Midoriya Izuku, inviting the detective to call them Izuku. Liar Liar expressed curiosity about how Izuku knew about their quirk, noting that not many people outside the Force and heroes were aware of them. Kitten shared a memory of how Tsukachi had once intervened when some kids were picking on them, revealing that they had looked up the detective later. Tsukachi admitted he didn't remember the incident but appreciated Izuku's enthusiasm. Kitten reassured him that it was understandable given how many people he dealt with daily. Dadzawa commended Tsukachi for his work. Ravenkiller and others reacted with surprise at the mention of hacking, with Rat Satan proudly declaring Izuku's skills. The group was astonished to learn that Izuku had once hacked into UA systems. Liar Liar questioned whether that was acceptable, and Kitten apologized, but Rat Satan reassured them that it highlighted the need for some improvements. Support King expressed relief that the coding was secure, while Dadzawa comforted Kitten, assuring them they had done nothing wrong. Rat Satan then requested a private conversation with Dadzawa, who agreed. In their private chat, Nizu inquired about Izuku's analyses, and Dadzawa confirmed he had seen them. Nizu proposed that Izuku would be visiting UA more frequently, which Dadzawa was concerned about, fearing it might corrupt Izuku's innocence. Nizu suggested that Dadzawa could train Izuku, to which Dadzawa agreed, emphasizing that they would not force him into anything. Nizu planned to invite Izuku to UA in 5 days, promising him some tea about the Hero Commission. Back in the UA staff chat, Listener wondered where Dadzawa and Nizu had gone, and Ravenkiller asked what they discussed. Dadzawa reminded them that it was a private matter. Kitten greeted both Dadzawa and Nizu again. Angel Feeder and Emperor Nugget commented on Kitten's purity, and Kitten excitedly called out to Kigo. Rat Satan asked Izuku if he would be free to visit UA again in 5 days, to which Kitten happily agreed. Ravenkiller expressed excitement about the upcoming visit. Listener eagerly anticipated seeing Kitten again, while Emperor Nugget expressed a desire to stay this time. Kitten was thrilled and couldn't wait to meet everyone again, including Shudo. The chapter concluded with a note about upcoming changes to the storyline to enhance future chapters, including details about Izuku's past, the dorm system, and his admiration for Eraserhead. Nizu was aware of her ferocity. The secret of One for All was known to the entire staff. In a lively chat among the UA staff, Ravenkiller excitedly reached out to Izuku, expressing her eagerness for his visit. Kitten, as Izuku was affectionately called, confirmed his plans to visit, bringing joy to everyone in the chat. The staff members, including Uncle Mike and Cementos, engaged warmly with him, showing their fondness and support. Izuku offered to bring drinks and snacks for everyone, insisting it was no burden at all. He expressed how much he valued them, referring to them as family. The heartfelt sentiment moved the others, with Ravenkiller playfully reacting to Izuku's sweetness. Aizawa, known as Dadzawa, acknowledged Izuku's affection, claiming him as his son, which led to light-hearted banter among the staff. conversation continued. Izuku emphasized his love for his mother, explaining that family connections could extend beyond blood ties. He cherished Aizawa as a father figure, which further endeared him to the group. The playful exchanges showcased the strong bonds they had formed, filled with laughter and warmth. Amidst the lightheartedness, Aizawa experienced a rush of emotions, feeling a sense of pride in his relationship with Izuku. The others teased him about this newfound feeling, celebrating the growth of their dynamic. The chat was filled with joy as they continued to support one another, creating a sense of belonging. As the conversation wound down, Izuku affectionately asked Goddess if he could call her Grandma Chio, to which she happily agreed. The sweetness of their interactions left everyone feeling uplifted, reinforcing the familial ties they had built together. The scene shifted to a moment of reflection, where Izuku's bright emerald eyes shimmered with unshed tears, capturing the essence of his journey and the connections he had forged. Loud and obnoxious laughter echoed through the numbing silence of the deserted building, mocking him with their taunts. His bushy hair bobbed slowly as a dark-sleeved hand reached up to wipe the traitorous salty liquid that seeped from his closed eyes. Small sniffles accompanied by shivers racked his body, making the trio laugh at his helplessness. The red-eyed leader of the bullies hissed a threat, letting his smirk convey the sincerity behind it. The brown-haired boy next to him slung his backpack over his shoulder and let out a bark of laughter, ridiculing Izuku's aspirations. He claimed that Izuku couldn't even become a janitor. The third boy added with a sickening giggle that Izuku was just a waste of space. Izuku's eyes watered again, his hands clasping the side of his torso where he had been kicked. Bakugo Katsuki smirked, oblivious to the pain he caused. He dismissed the others, stating he was leaving this place. Izuku flinched slightly at the sudden sound of footsteps. Bakugo and his minions were clever enough to leave no physical traces of their bullying. Bakugo craned his head to look at the whimpering boy, a smug look on his face. He taunted Izuku, suggesting an easy way to become a hero. Izuku's eyes shot up, hoping for a trace of the Kaken he once knew, the one he dreamed of becoming heroes with. But Bakugo's words turned cruel. He advised Izuku to pray for a quirk in the next life and to take a dive off the roof. Silence fell, deafening and heavy. Katsuki's eyes widened in horror as he realized the weight of his words. His minions stared at him in disbelief. Katsuki's heartbeat quickened as he turned to face Izuku, who now wore a lifeless expression. The spark in his eyes had vanished, replaced by an endless void. Izuku stood up, gripping his bag tightly, and dragged his feet out of the classroom while the trio watched in fear and confusion. Bakugo called out to him, breathless and shocked by his own words. But there was no longer a Deku, he was Midoriya Izuku now. As Izuku continued walking, Katsuki snapped out of his stupor and stormed after him, placing a firm hand on Izuku's shoulder. The touch elicited a shaky sigh from Izuku. When he rasped for Bakugo to remove his hand, the blonde complied, watching as Izuku walked away without a glance back. The last thing Izuku heard before exiting the building was Bakugo's voice, admitting that he had gone too far. He gently retrieved his soaked notebook from the koi pond, shook it off, and placed it in his bag. That day marked the end of Kaken. Bakugo Katsuki had successfully extinguished the light of Kaken. Izuku screamed internally, refusing to accept defeat as the sludge invaded his throat. He couldn't die yet. He still wanted to become a hero, and his mother needed him. The sludge cackled, mocking his struggle, but black spots danced in his vision, and he slowly faded from consciousness. The last thing he heard was a muffled command to smash. When he regained consciousness, he felt something slapping his cheek. Slowly opening his eyes, he groaned in pain, only to be met with the creepy smiling face of All Might. Startled, he crawled back, questioning if All Might had been the one to slap him. All Might exclaimed his relief at Izuku waking up, but Izuku was confused about the lack of immediate safety protocols. He asked how long he had been out, and All Might replied it had only been 5 minutes. Izuku interrupted, asking about the sludge, and All Might, looking momentarily disappointed, announced that he had caught the villain responsible. He waved soda bottles filled with the green sludge, expressing his intent to make the villain pay for his crimes. Izuku thanked him, but All Might continued, excitedly mentioning he had even signed Izuku's book. Izuku tried to interject, but All Might insisted he had to leave. Determined, Izuku called out to All Might, expressing his gratitude for saving him and asking a pressing question. He noticed faint white fumes emanating from All Might, who seemed slightly scared. All Might apologized, stating that a pro-hero had many responsibilities and needed to depart. He began stretching before launching himself into the sky. Izuku realized he was clutching onto All Might's leg, feeling the rush of wind. He knew this was a rare opportunity to ask someone who might have answers. All Might was the symbol of peace, and Izuku hoped his words could help him overcome Bakugu's harshness. All Might yelled for him to let go, but Izuku insisted he couldn't, fearing he would fall to his death. All Might acknowledged this and urged him to hold on tight. A few moments later, they landed on the rooftop of a tall building. Izuku released his grip and rolled onto the floor. All Might reprimanded him for his recklessness, but Izuku felt frustrated. All Might instructed him to knock on the door and get down safely, but Izuku pleaded to ask his question. All Might looked surprised by his urgency, but Izuku was determined to know more. He frowned and sighed again, urging the young man to be quick. The boy hesitated, looking down at his hands as he gathered his thoughts. He had always dreamed of becoming a hero, someone who could save everyone with a smile. Only his mother believed in him, and he needed to know if it was possible to become a hero without a quirk. When he looked up, he was taken aback by the sight of a skinny man with blonde hair and unusual bangs. The man appeared to be in distress, and the boy realized it was All Might. All Might confirmed his identity, and the boy felt a lump in his throat, asking what had happened to him. The hero sighed and leaned against the concrete railing, explaining that his current form was a result of a past injury. He revealed a large scar, indicating that an enemy had nearly destroyed his digestive system years ago. As a result, he could only maintain his heroic form for a limited time each day. The boy could only mumble All Might's name, realizing the symbol of peace was in a dire state. All Might then asked why the boy wanted to be a hero. The boy gulped, nervous at the unexpected question. He expressed his desire to save people and become a beacon of hope for those who felt lost. He wanted to help everyone, regardless of their quirks, and reshape society into a place where no one felt excluded. All Might smiled at the boy's ideals, but his expression soon turned serious. He acknowledged the boy's admirable goal but explained the harsh reality of being a hero without a quirk. He cautioned that pro-heroes often faced life-threatening situations, and pursuing such a dangerous path without a quirk could lead to dire consequences. Instead, he suggested considering other respectable careers, like becoming a police officer or a doctor. The boy's heart sank at the response, feeling the weight of disappointment. All Might's concern for his safety was evident, but it still hurt to hear. With a heavy heart, All Might expressed his sorrow and leaped off the building in his heroic form, leaving the boy alone on the roof. From All Might's perspective, he recognized the boy's noble intentions, finding it rare to see such ideals in this generation, especially from someone quirkless. The boy reminded him of his younger self, yearning to become a hero despite the odds. For a moment, All Might considered sharing the secret of One for All, but he hesitated, realizing he barely knew the boy. Trust was hard-earned, especially after past experiences with other young people who had not lived up to their promises. He understood the dangers of being a hero all too well. His first mission had opened his eyes to the terrifying realities of their work, and he couldn't encourage the boy to pursue a path that could lead to his demise. It felt like he would be instigating a tragedy, and his conscience could not bear that burden. Meanwhile, the boy found himself enjoying the view from the rooftop, feeling a sense of solitude that mirrored his life. He gazed down at the empty street and contemplated the advice he had received from a former friend. Just then he recalled his mother's unwavering support and love, reminding him that he could become a hero. The thought of abandoning her was unbearable. He stumbled back from the edge, realizing how close he had come to making a grave mistake. Determined not to let despair consume him, he wiped away his tears. All Might's warning about danger did not deter him. He was resolute in his dream of becoming a hero. He needed to talk to his mother and share his thoughts with her, as she deserved to know how much she meant to him. As he approached his home, he noticed a commotion outside. Confused, he saw All Might peeking around the corner of a building. Ignoring the hero, he pushed through the crowd, only to be horrified by the sight of a sludge villain holding a woman hostage. The heroes present appeared paralyzed with fear, and he couldn't understand how they had been given their licenses. Before he knew it, he found himself just a few feet away from the scene. The shouts of onlookers faded into the background as he focused on the woman in distress. He felt a surge of determination. He had to save her, no matter the cost. They needed to aim for its eye. Izuku quickly grabbed his backpack and threw it at the creature's eye. With a loud shriek, the villain pulled back from the woman, allowing her to breathe. Wasting no time, he pulled her out with force, grateful for his training. All Might appeared, delivering a powerful punch to the sludge, causing it to rain down. The woman was crying, and Izuku felt himself being pulled away by Death Arms. Death Arms expressed his frustration, questioning what Izuku had been thinking and reminding him of the danger he had put himself in. Izuku, feeling the anger rise within him, snapped back, declaring he had saved the woman's life. Death Arms tried to assert that they were professional heroes who had the situation under control, but Izuku was too upset to listen. As he walked away, he heard the woman call out to him. She thanked him for saving her and expressed her gratitude, saying she didn't know how she could repay him. Izuku felt his face heat up, realizing he needed to improve his social skills. He stammered that it was nothing, just what a true hero would do. The woman smiled and asked for his name. He introduced himself as Midoriya Izuku, and she offered him a box of donuts, saying he would make an amazing hero. Unable to refuse the treat, he accepted her gift and walked home, determined to become a hero and save everyone he could. As Izuku walked down the street, enjoying the donuts, he remained unaware of a pair of ruby eyes watching him, filled with guilt, regret, anger, and sadness. Once he reached a quiet neighborhood, All Might emerged from an alley, grinning widely. Izuku was surprised to see him, especially after All Might had been surrounded by the press. All Might explained that he had a proposition for Izuku. He recalled the time Izuku had asked if one could become a hero without a quirk, and he had been conflicted. He explained that being a hero was dangerous, and many young heroes with powerful quirks had lost their lives on their first missions. He couldn't simply tell Izuku he could become a hero and then watch him die. Izuku felt a slight quiver in his lip, unsure of where the conversation was heading. All Might gently inquired about what had compelled him to rush in and save the woman. Izuku admitted that his legs had moved on their own. He just knew he had to save her. All Might smiled, recognizing that great heroes often acted instinctively to help those in need. He believed Izuku could become a hero too. Izuku interrupted, affirming that he knew he could become a hero, even if no one else believed it. He expressed his desire to leave, as his mother was likely worried about him. All Might insisted he still had a proposition to share. He revealed that he had chosen Izuku to be his successor, a moment that left Izuku confused. All Might explained that his quirk could be passed down to someone deemed worthy. The first user cultivates the power and then passes it on, creating a network of strength among those who seek to save others. He named this power One for All, but Izuku found it a bit strange. All Might insisted he wanted Izuku to inherit his power, but Izuku firmly declined. He stated that he wanted to become the first quirkless hero and prove that one didn't need a quirk to be a hero. Despite All Might's protests, Izuku stood his ground, expressing that he would rather risk everything to save someone than live with regret. All Might was taken aback by Izuku's determination, recalling his own past and the doubts he had faced. He wished Izuku good luck as the young hero walked away, determined to forge his own path. Frustration was an emotion Izuku was not accustomed to. He had never felt so frustrated in his life, not when he was announced quirkless, not when Katsuki bullied him, and not even when his teachers failed him. He stormed into his home, throwing his bag onto the couch and collapsing onto his bed. Inko, his mother, was startled by his sudden entrance while preparing dinner. She knew her son was struggling and that he faced bullying daily. When she had confronted him about it, he had panicked and assured her everything was fine, claiming that the bullying was normal for a quirkless kid. Inko didn't believe him. A quirkless child constantly bullied could not possibly be all right, and as a lawyer, She understood the signs of distress all too well. She could practically sense suspicion. Inko was a fierce protector. After noticing the shift in the friendship dynamic between her son and Katsuki, she made it her mission to dig deeper, not only as a mother but also as an advocate for justice for the marginalized and quirkless individuals in society. Inko was no amateur. She was a brilliant lawyer, much like her son, Izuku. Isashi, her late husband, had been a scientist and a natural genius as well. It wouldn't be surprising if someone caught wind of her skills in hacking. Gaining access to the school cameras proved more challenging than she anticipated. She wasn't a professional hacker, and Alidra had minimal security. Furthermore, Izuku's bullies were surprisingly clever. Only 2 tapes revealed how the bullies, including Katsuki, had targeted her son in the open corridor. This indicated that the rest of the abuse occurred either in blind spots or outside the school premises. It took all her willpower to refrain from confronting the Bakuga household after learning about Katsuki. Mitsuki and Inko had only been acquaintances as neighbors before the former moved away, so she had no desire to associate with the Bakugas any longer. Izuku consistently denied her claims that he didn't believe Katsuki was helping him, leaving her with no choice but to remain silent. No legal authority was willing to acknowledge that one of the most prestigious schools was fostering bullying. Even when she finally presented the evidence she had gathered, no one seemed to care. Her verbal statements were dismissed as mere overreactions regarding her son. Inko often wished she could dismantle the entire system and cast it into a volcano. When fighting for someone quirkless, defeat was almost guaranteed. But that never deterred her from trying. Perhaps one day, fate would take pity on her and grant her a victory. Inko knocked on Izuku's door, asking if he was okay. Hearing small sniffles, she felt a surge of concern. She announced her intention to enter, and when there was no reply, she pushed the door open, horrified to find her son cocooned in bedsheets, holding a box of tissues and crying. Without hesitation, she cradled his tear-streaked face against her chest, gently rubbing his back and hair. She reassured him that it was okay to let it all out. Once he calmed down, Inko smiled and handed him a glass of water. She urged him to tell her what had happened, insisting he be honest. After half an hour of sharing, Inko's demeanor shifted to one of fierce determination, resembling someone on a mission. Though Izuku felt a twinge of fear at her intensity, he understood it wasn't directed at him. Inko gently patted his hair, expressing her pride in him for sharing everything. She apologized for not being able to help sooner and asked if he would trust her with a plan she had in mind. Izuku looked into her eyes and nodded, confident that whatever she had planned would be for his benefit. The next day, he left Alidra under the pretense of transferring while successfully enrolling in online courses. Inko knew he would excel in them within months. She felt relieved that Katsuki had the decency not to show his face around them. Each evening, Inko and Izuku would visit Dagoba Beach to clean it, hoping to restore the area. Izuku trained daily for the entrance exam, and Inko had developed a more powerful version of her quirk, capable of attracting heavy objects. With Izuku's guidance, she learned to throw things, which she had once thought impossible. Izuku expressed his excitement about the upcoming entrance exam, eagerly anticipating the challenge. Inko laughed at his enthusiasm and suggested they buy him new shoes along with groceries, noting that his red ones were worn out. He nodded eagerly and jumped to his feet, his spirit unbroken despite everything he had endured. He decided to remain distant only from his bullies, Katsuki and All Might, while maintaining his cheerful demeanor with everyone else. 3 hours later, as they walked down a sparsely populated street with several bags in hand, their laughter filled the air. Suddenly, Inko dropped her belongings and rushed toward an old woman struggling to cross the road, just as a minibus approached. Inko sprinted faster than she thought possible, lifting the old woman into her arms. Just as the bus came close, a sudden force pushed Inko from behind, twisting their fall and wrapping around them. When the ringing in her ears subsided, Inko turned to see her son, unconscious and bloodied, having shielded them from the impact. His head had struck the pavement hard. Inko sat in front of the emergency room, fighting back tears. A hero named Hammerman had brought them to the hospital and checked on her and the old woman. A few kind civilians had offered comfort but soon left, returning to their own lives. The sound of the door opening startled her, and she jumped to her feet when the doctor entered. The doctor, with orangish skin, addressed her, and Inko hurried forward, anxious to hear about her son. The doctor's serious expression filled her with dread as she delivered the news that Izuku had sustained a severe head injury. Had they arrived any later, the outcome could have been dire. Inko gasped, her heart sinking at the revelation. She almost lost her son. The doctor sighed and continued, explaining that Izuku was in a relatively stable condition but that they needed to place him in a medically induced coma for at least 2 weeks to ensure there was no extensive hemorrhage. Some of the tissues had suffered significant trauma, and they wanted to avoid stressing his functions. The doctor reassured her that they were doing their best and that this was the last option they had chosen. He asked if she was all right with it. Inko thought about it for a while. She had heard about medically induced comas, but she felt she had no choice. She agreed and signed the paperwork. The hospital was kind enough to give her a day to arrange the payment, as Hammerman had informed them of how her son had saved 2 people. That evening, the old woman's daughter visited and insisted on covering 20% of the fee, the part she could afford, in gratitude for saving her mother. 2 weeks and 2 days later, it had been over a week since the entrance exam and a day since Izuku woke up. Inko felt sad that Izuku had lost the chance to get into UA, but she was relieved that he was safe. The coma had helped heal his brain, and he was almost back to normal. The doctor had provided her with instructions for his care. At first, the green-haired boy was confused, but after learning what had happened, he felt disappointed. Inko did her best to cheer him up, and by some slide of fate, it worked. A week later, she and Izuku had a heartfelt conversation and decided to start a cafe to distract themselves while enjoying a change. Izuku applied for more online courses to develop skills until fate offered him another chance. He suggested that they rescue abandoned cats and give them a new life. Thus, Nico Nico Cafe was established near Dagoba Beach. A few weeks later, Izuku was added to an unknown group chat. In the UA staff chat, Kitten greeted everyone cheerfully, while Raven Killer and Listener excitedly welcomed him. Badass Block asked how he was doing, and Kitten responded positively. Bloodlord mentioned having a tight schedule that day, needing to take his class for combat training and make reports on their progress. Kitten expressed concern, and Bloodlord thanked him for the offer but explained it was his responsibility. Listener chimed in, noting that Shoyuda wouldn't want his son to work anyway, relieved that he was not online. Kitten assumed Shoyuda must be in class. Meanwhile, Aizawa Shoyuda felt bored, tired, and frustrated with his loud class. He wished for a quiet place to nap but was met with the chaos around him. Shuda was conversing with Ida, which pleased Aizawa, while Bakugu grumbled as usual. Kirishima and Denki laughed, and 13 stumbled over words while Uraraka bounced with excitement. Yaoyorozu was paying attention, but Aoyama was staring at Aizawa, prompting a sigh from him. He longed for the end of the class so he could retreat into the comfort of his sleeping bag, but fate had other plans. Suddenly, Izuku sauntered into the living room, scribbling in his journal about a new discovery. Inko greeted him sweetly and asked what he was writing. Izuku grinned and explained his thoughts on quirks becoming stronger over generations but not reaching their full potential. He elaborated on how the genes of both parents play a role in the manifestation of quirks, leading to limitations in their mastery. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by breaking news on the TV. The report announced a villain attack on UA, stating that Class 1A and the faculty had been ambushed by unnamed villains during a simulation. One student had managed to gather the staff, including All Might, just in time to avoid casualties, but the report indicated that the staff were critically injured. Inko flinched when she heard Izuku's notebook drop to the floor. He rushed upstairs to his room, pulling out his phone in a panic. After several unanswered calls to Aizawa and other teachers, he opted to text them in the group chat and wait for a response. In the UA staff chat, Kitten frantically asked if everyone was all right and inquired about Aizawa, 13, Shudo, and All Might. After a few minutes, Rat Satan came online and urged Izuku to calm down, assuring him that Todoroki and the students were safe. Just some minor scratches. All Might had arrived in time to save Aizawa and 13. Kitten asked how they were doing, but Rat Satan admitted that they were not alright. Izuku shoved his phone into his pocket and rushed downstairs. Inko stood by the open door with a sympathetic smile. She called out to her teary-eyed son as he sprinted out of the house, knowing he would make a run for Yue as soon as he slammed his door. Izuku ran as fast as he could, shrieking when someone lifted him off the ground. Hawks smiled and suggested that this would be faster. Izuku choked back a sob but nodded, determined to ensure Aizawa and Shudo were safe. He couldn't afford to lose his father figure or his best friend. He was also resolved to find out who the unnamed villains were, and they would face consequences. Recovery Girl sighed as the door to the infirmary burst open, revealing a disheveled Izuku panting furiously. Shudo, who had been sitting beside her after visiting Aizawa, flinched and stood up immediately upon seeing the greenette. Within moments, Izuku was hugging him tightly, tears soaking his shirt. He expressed how scared he had been, pulling back to rub his tears away with the sleeves of his dark purple hoodie. Shudo awkwardly patted Izuku's shoulder, reassuring him that everyone was safe now. The greenette frowned and turned to Recovery Girl, asking about Aizawa and 13. The petite old woman sighed and gestured to an empty seat beside her. Izuku sat down and took the glass of water she offered, gulping it quickly and slipping into a coughing fit, but Chio chided him in time. Aizawa and 13 were safe, but their injuries were serious. Recovery Girl explained that she couldn't use her quirk due to their delicate situation. Izuku gasped, realizing the implications of her words. He whispered in horror, wondering if their injuries were fatal. Shudo and Chio exchanged glances before Chio nodded hesitantly, rushing to calm Izuku's panic. She assured him that she had managed to heal them with IVs and that they were resting, not expected to wake until morning. Izuku nodded, still in shock, and turned to Shudo, asking if he was all right and if he wanted to talk. Shudo replied that he was fine but mentioned that he had seen Aizawa suffer. Izuku rubbed Shudo's back, understanding how traumatizing it must be to see someone he viewed as a parental figure in pain. A few moments later, Shudo frowned and described a villain he had encountered, one with hands all over his body and face. Izuku frowned, questioning if it was a quirk mutation. Shudo clarified that it was not a mutation, and Izuku was too deep in thought to feel embarrassed. Shudo described the villain's quirk as something like disintegration, but he hadn't been able to get a good look as they had been thrown into different zones. Izuku's eyes widened as he asked if someone had a portal-like quirk. Shudo confirmed that the villain had looked like mist and had a big bird-like creature with him, which the hand villain referred to as Nomu. Izuku gasped, horrified by the description of the creature, which had an exposed brain and could withstand All Might's punches. Shudo explained that it seemed to follow the hand villain's orders. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Chio invited the newcomers in, and they were relieved to see Azui, Uraraka, and Ida. Ida began to greet Todoroki but paused when he noticed Izuku. Azui asked who Izuku was, and Todoroki introduced him as his friend. Uraraka bounced over to Izuku, excited to meet him. Ida and Azui introduced themselves as well, but Todoroki asked what they were doing there. Ida explained that they had come to check on Aizawa. He then inquired about how Izuku had gotten into UA, noting that he didn't seem like a student there. Before Izuku could respond, Chio intervened, asking them not to crowd the infirmary. Ida immediately bowed in apology while the others looked on awkwardly. Todoroki requested that they keep Izuku's presence a secret, and Ida promised to do so. Azui asked about Aizawa's condition, and Shudo mumbled that he was resting. Uraraka expressed her concern about Aizawa's injuries, hoping they hadn't caused permanent damage. Izuku's curiosity about what had happened to Aizawa grew, but he hesitated to ask, knowing they might not share details about the school's private matters. Todoroki caught his unspoken request and asked what had happened after they were scattered. Azui recounted how she and Mineta had been thrown into a flood zone but managed to escape. When they reached the central plaza, they saw Aizawa fighting the bird creature, which had caused severe injuries. Uraraka comforted Azui, who had experienced a near-death moment. Izuku realized that the villain's quirk required contact. Azui explained that All Might had arrived and they had carried Aizawa out of the building, but she didn't know what had happened afterward. Todoroki thanked her sincerely, and Ida adjusted his glasses, suggesting it was time for them to leave. Todoroki-kun, you should be heading back as well, Uraraka said with a smile, assuring him that his secret was safe with them. As the group exited, Izuku sat down on one of the spare beds, mumbling about the villains. Todoroki observed him with concern before shrugging it off. He pondered the implications of a quirk that required contact, possibly needing 5 points of contact. Disintegration? Decay? They had been at the USJ, which raised questions about how the villains knew their location. Was there an insider? A slide of luck? No, it had to be a mole, but that seemed impossible. Could it be a quirk? Interference? There had to be something. The bird-like creature could absorb shocks, take orders, and withstand All Might's punches. An exposed brain? Too complex to be a mutation unless it was biologically engineered. That made things worse. Who were they? The group, the one with the hands? There was also a portal user. He needed to speak with All Might and Nizu-san. Shudo stared at the white walls as his friend continued to mutter possibilities when something struck him. He asked Izuku how he had gotten there. The greenette looked up and sheepishly explained that when he heard the news, he couldn't stay put. He tried to contact everyone, including Todoroki, but when he couldn't reach them, he contacted Nizu-san, who assured him they were safe. Determined to check on them, he made his way to UA, where Hawks picked him up midway. Hawks had left him in UA's backyard to avoid media confrontation and then flew away. Izuku knew the way in because Nizu-san had allowed him, so he snuck in easily. Shudo blinked in disbelief and shook his head, calling Izuku crazy but thanking him for everything. Izuku beamed with a bright grin before grabbing Recovery Girl's notepad and jotting down the points swirling in his mind. He had filled nearly a whole page when All Might walked into the infirmary. Izuku jumped to his feet and rushed to hug All Might, surprising everyone in the room. He pulled back slightly, sniffling as he expressed his gratitude for saving Aizawa and Shudo. All Might, slightly surprised, wrapped his arms around the small greenette, pulling him into another embrace. He acknowledged that it was his duty and admitted to having acted foolishly, hoping to ensure Izuku's happiness. Izuku grinned adorably and extended his hand, introducing himself. All Might, unable to hold back his emotions, extended his hand in return, introducing himself as Yagi Tashinori. Shudo, observing the interaction, watched curiously as Izuku began to explain what had happened, omitting details about the quirk. All Might trusted the young Todoroki with his secret, but he was shocked to see All Might in his deflated form. Shudo expressed his concerns about All Might discouraging Izuku, but since everything was alright between them and Izuku had forgiven him, he had no qualms. He assured All Might that his secret was safe and that Endeavor would not find out. All Might smiled but soon frowned, asking Shudo if he could share what Endeavor had been doing to him. He had seen Izuku refer to Endeavor as an abuser in their group chat. Shudo took a moment before sharing everything about Endeavor, earning a comforting hug from All Might while Izuku sniffled with a box of tissues in hand. All Might admitted he had no idea about the extent of Shudo's suffering, believing Endeavor was merely competitive. He expressed his regret and hoped for Shudo's forgiveness. Shudo shook his head, insisting there was nothing to forgive. He explained that while many heroes aspired to surpass All Might, not everyone resorted to creating weapons to do so. It was Endeavor's fault that his family had suffered, and All Might was not to blame. He also mentioned that he preferred to be called Shudo instead of Todoroki. Izuku smiled happily as his best friend and All Might connected. Now, he just had to wait for Aizawa to wake up. As time passed, Yagi offered to drop Izuku home since Hawks was unavailable. The walk was silent yet comfortable. The next day, Izuku rushed into Recovery Girl's office and hugged Aizawa, causing the teacher to wince slightly. With tears in his eyes, Izuku called him Dad, squeezing him tightly. Aizawa chuckled deeply, using his non-bandaged arm to ruffle Izuku's hair and tuck him under his chin. Izuku realized he had accidentally called Aizawa Dad, but he did not regret it. He expressed his fear, saying he thought he might lose him. Aizawa reassured him that he was safe. He never understood how he went from disliking every single brat to cherishing the cheeky little one in his arms, and he preferred not to dwell on it. A few minutes later, Izuku and Aizawa arrived at Nizu's office, where All Might was already present. Nizu greeted Izuku cheerfully, apologizing for the short notice and requesting his assistance with a case. Izuku responded enthusiastically, expressing his desire to uncover who had dared to attack the people he loved. All Might felt a shiver at the cold undertone in Izuku's voice. The duo took their seats and began discussing the USJ attack. Izuku summarized the situation, noting that Shigaraki was the boss, with an assistant who had a warp gate quirk and a biologically engineered creature called Nomu, all connected to All for One, the villain All Might had defeated. He confirmed his understanding, tapping a pen against his chin. Nizu agreed but suspected there were more threats out there, as Shigaraki likely had a team or was trying to recruit members. Izuku insisted they needed to stop Shigaraki before he could gather more powerful quirks, suggesting an ambush while remaining cautious of their abilities. Nizu nodded, flipping through his files to explain Shigaraki's quirk, Decay, which allowed him to decay anything he touched, albeit at a basic level. He mentioned Kurogiri, the one with the warp gate quirk, and the disturbing nature of the Nomu, which had once been human, as revealed by its DNA. Izuku realized the gravity of the situation, understanding the horror of turning humans into mutations through quirk-inducing drags and DNA manipulation. Nizu sympathized, while All Might and Aizawa looked on in shock. Izuku proposed they investigate immediately, as the captured Nomu might not be the only one, and the more that were created, the more vulnerable they would become, especially given how the Nomu had withstood All Might's attacks. He nodded at Nizu's words, noting that All Might wanted to discuss something important. The skinny blonde straightened up, and Aizawa glared at All Might, his expression intense. All Might requested Izuku's attention, admitting he hadn't been the ideal mentor lately and expressed his fears of being responsible for Izuku's future. He recounted the dangers faced by heroes and how he had nearly lost his life during his early patrols. He acknowledged that fighting a powerful enemy without a quirk seemed like a suicide mission, but he had forgotten his own beginnings. His mentor had entrusted him with her quirk because he had the will to risk his life for others, even as a quirkless individual. He emphasized that every hero's job was risky, regardless of their abilities, and that the world needed true heroes who would save people no matter the cost. He had seen Izuku embody that spirit, even when he had put himself in danger. All Might then asked Izuku if he would accept his power, one for all, to lead the next generation of heroes. He expressed his belief that the quirk would be passed on to someone worthy and pure. However, he reassured Izuku that if he chose not to accept it, he would still be proud of him, knowing his spirit would guide him on the path of a true hero. He encouraged Izuku to take his time with the decision. Izuku remained silent for a few tense moments, while Aizawa and Nizu exchanged glances, both feeling the weight of the moment. Finally, Izuku broke the silence, expressing his appreciation for All Might's words and acknowledging his realization of past mistakes. He revealed that he had already forgiven All Might but felt he had to decline the offer of the quirk. He wanted to become the first quirkless hero to prove that anyone could be a hero, regardless of their abilities. He believed that standing atop a powerful quirk would undermine his message of inclusivity and equality. He thanked All Might for his trust but stood firm in his decision. All Might stood up and embraced Izuku, expressing his gratitude and confidence in Izuku's potential as a hero. Nizu smiled with satisfaction, while Aizawa struggled to contain his pride in his son. Everyone felt a swell of emotion in that moment. 4 days later, Izuku returned to Nizu's office, Aizawa at his side, looking vigilant. Nizu proposed that he take Izuku on as his personal student, and without hesitation, Izuku accepted the offer. Aizawa sighed in defeat, knowing he couldn't change Izuku's mind. As such, he now had to deal with 2 demons, the younger of whom was his unofficial son. Presently, Izuku was mumbling about various possibilities. Nizu smiled, understanding Izuku's thoughts, while Aizawa struggled to keep up. Izuku expressed his frustration, unable to shake a troubling thought. He had been trying to find additional clues regarding a case. They had visited the USJ twice in the last 3 days, and the only information he could gather was that the security systems had been disabled, likely due to warp interference. One of the captured villains possessed a quirk that could manipulate electric signals, which explained part of the situation. However, Izuku was puzzled about how the League had obtained information about their trip. Aizawa and Nizu exchanged glances as Izuku continued. He suspected there might be a mole within UA or that one of the villains had a quirk that allowed them to steal information. He hesitated to accuse any students, fearing it would break the trust they had built, but he felt lost regarding how to proceed. Aizawa sighed, leaning back in his seat. He acknowledged that, as a teacher, he shouldn't be thinking this way, but given the circumstances, he could think of 2 students who raised suspicions. He didn't want to believe it, but trust was a fragile thing. Nizu asked who he was referring to. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, naming Koda and Mineta. Koda was quiet and communicated with animals, which could allow messages to be sent discreetly. Mineta had been acting strangely, locking himself in his room and talking on his phone, which also raised concerns. Aizawa noted that every student could potentially be a suspect, complicating the investigation. Izuku frowned, arguing that suspecting students and staff should be a last resort. A small misunderstanding could undermine everything UA stood for. Aizawa agreed, pondering how the little bundle of sunshine could possess such wisdom at times. Curious, Izuku asked if Detective Tsukachi had questioned the villains. Nizu nodded, indicating that he had planned to do so but had not yet received an update. He decided to call Tsukachi for more information. After a brief conversation, Nizu reported that the villains had been questioned but had not provided any useful answers. Izuku expressed his frustration, feeling the weight of the situation. Aizawa grunted in agreement, wondering why Nizu had to involve his son in such burdensome matters. Izuku inquired if Tsukachi had a list of the villains' quirks. Nizu confirmed that he likely did and sent a message to Tsukachi to obtain the data. Izuku scratched his head, suggesting that if they didn't get any leads from the villains, they might need to question the heroes and students at UA. He understood the reluctance but emphasized the necessity of pursuing every avenue to prevent any potential threats. As Nizu received Tsukachi's email, Izuku noted that some quirks had been recorded despite missing records, which seemed suspicious. He pondered how this was possible, given that the villains wore quirk-canceling cuffs. Aizawa, confused, asked if Tsukachi's quirk could discern lies. Izuku agreed but expressed concern about the implications. Nizu smiled slightly, sensing they were on the same wavelength. Izuku looked worried, realizing that if they shared the same thought, it could complicate matters further. Aizawa, frustrated, requested they speak plainly. Izuku explained that something seemed off with the police. They were only speculating, but it warranted investigation before questioning anyone at UA. He suggested there might be a mole within the police force. Aizawa was taken aback and asked Izuku to elaborate. Izuku clarified that every villain wore quirk-canceling cuffs, preventing any mental manipulation. The quirks recorded by Tsukachi lacked proof due to the cuffs, leading to the possibility that someone within the police could manipulate perceptions. If an officer had a quirk that could alter another's abilities, they could have misled Tsukachi into believing a lie. Aizawa struggled to grasp the concept, prompting Izuku to simplify his explanation. He illustrated that if an officer with a manipulative quirk lied about their abilities, Tsukachi could be tricked into believing them. If a villain had indeed stolen information and denied it, Tsukachi might accept their denial as truth due to this manipulation. Nizu praised Izuku's intelligence, while Aizawa rubbed his face in exasperation. The case had indeed become complicated. Nizu contacted Tsukachi to arrange for all officers to gather for questioning, but learned that some were occupied with other investigations and would return in 2 days. Nizu sighed and asked Tsukachi to keep their conversation confidential and to inform him when all the officers were back. Izuku expressed his urgency, suggesting they should question the staff and students. Nizu considered this and nodded, stating that as pro-heroes, they had a valid reason to suspect anyone. He and Aizawa would assist Tsukachi in questioning the staff, while Izuku should call Todoroki to inform him of the situation after confirming Tsukachi's innocence, so he could help question the students. Izuku nodded and waited as Nizu requested Tsukachi to arrive at UA in an hour with quirk-canceling cuffs to ensure those being questioned were not under any deceptive influence. When Tsukachi arrived, Aizawa called for Todoroki, who looked confused about what was happening. Tsukachi introduced himself and explained the necessity of using the quirk-canceling cuffs, assuring Todoroki that they would explain everything soon. After receiving reassurance from his best friend and teacher, Shudo accepted the cuffs, and the detective asked him a few questions that would determine his innocence. Tsukachi sighed in relief when the results were clean and stood up. Once the teachers left the room, Izuku explained the situation to Todoroki, who agreed to help Izuku question their classmates. Izuku felt reluctant about questioning students his age, but he understood it was necessary. Aizawa would assist them, and as heroes in training, they hoped their classmates would understand the gravity of the situation. However, Izuku feared one person might not understand: his bully, Bakugo Katsuki, who felt more like a ghost from his past. Nizu sincerely apologized for the unannounced interrogation, bowing to the staff and expressing that they wouldn't have taken such measures unless absolutely necessary. Aizawa also bowed in apology. Namuri and Hizashi shook their heads, and the rest of the staff sighed. Chio reassured them that no one blamed them. Vlad agreed, stating that as pro-heroes with experience, they had every right to be suspicious, and it was better than blindly trusting without reason. Midnight added that they understood the importance and difficulty of the situation. Snipe reminded them that they had all taken the test together. All Skinny Might softly assured them that they had done their job and should not feel guilty. Satisfied that none among the staff were traitors, Aizawa, Nizu, and Tsukachi returned to their office. Todoroki had left a few minutes earlier to wait for further instructions. Unfortunately for Bakugo, Izuku ended up discussing him with Shudo, who was visibly furious. Izuku made him promise not to mention anything about Bakugo, emphasizing that he wanted nothing to do with him. Izuku mentioned that he had sent Shudo back to the dorms to avoid making him look suspicious. The adults nodded and took a seat, noting that the staff was cleared, leaving them with the students. Aizawa mentioned that Vlad suggested questioning both Class 1A and 1B since he had discussed with his class that they were going to the USJ. He hoped they wouldn't mess things up. Izuku nodded and looked at Tsukachi, expressing his desire to be interrogated as well, insisting it wouldn't be fair otherwise. Tsukachi hesitated but was silenced by Aizawa's glare. Although Aizawa was reluctant to distrust Izuku, he recognized the Greenette's point. After Izuku's clean interrogation, he looked at the teachers curiously, wondering where they would question the students. Aizawa decided to ask Ida to gather everyone in the gym and requested Nizu to ask Hound Dog to accompany them, believing he could assist if needed. As the students made their way to the gym, Mina wondered why Sensei had called them at such an odd time. Kirishima suggested it might be for training, while Bakugo groaned about not being in their hero uniforms. Uraraka noted the seriousness of the situation, and Todoroki remained silent. Tokoyami ominously remarked about sensing darkness in the air, hinting at an unfolding mystery, which made Denki chuckle nervously. The teens entered the spacious gym and waited for Aizawa to arrive. A few minutes later, the door opened, revealing Aizawa followed by a slightly nervous Izuku. To their surprise, Nizu was perched on Izuku's shoulder, examining some notebooks, while Hound Dog scanned the students. Bakugo's gaze landed on Izuku, and a surge of confusion and anger overwhelmed him. He hadn't seen Izuku since leaving Aldra, and the Greenette's absence from the entrance exam puzzled him. The sight of Izuku with Nizu and Hound Dog only fueled his desire to confront him, leading him to charge forward. Izuku watched with a calm expression as Bakugo approached, ready to strike. Just then, a wall of ice appeared, causing Bakugo to slip and collide with the wall. Aizawa blinked in surprise and deactivated his quirk while Nizu chuckled. Izuku sighed and shook his head, peering around the massive ice wall. He called out to Todoroki with a playful smile, and the dual quirk user immediately melted the ice with his fire, surprising everyone since he rarely used that ability. Bakugo, recovering from his fall, turned to face Shuto, fury evident in his eyes, demanding to know why he had helped Izuku. The heterochromatic-eyed teen regarded Katsuki coldly, challenging him to make a foolish move. Katsuki understood the unspoken threat but refused to back down. He advanced toward Shudo, ready to unleash his quirk, but Aizawa intervened, erasing his powers. Izuku approached Shudo, whose collar was gripped tightly in Katsuki's fist. The ash blonde attempted to strike Shudo, but a firm hand caught his wrist, and his wide ruby eyes met Shudo's icy gaze. Aizawa's voice cut through the tension, urging Katsuki to refrain from violence. Taken aback, Katsuki stepped back, while Izuku turned to the rest of the class, his bright smile contrasting the serious atmosphere. Uraraka greeted him cheerfully, and Ida and Tsu returned his smile. Izuku responded enthusiastically, but Katsuki's frustration boiled over as he shouted about Izuku's nickname. Shudo snapped back, insisting on using Izuku's real name. Nizu, having hopped down from Aizawa's shoulder, acknowledged Katsuki's connection to Izuku, noting their shared history at Aldra Junior High. Izuku froze, realizing Nizu had pieced together information he thought was private. Nizu held up a notebook, asking Katsuki to explain its significance. Both boys were momentarily stunned, recognizing the book that Katsuki had previously destroyed. Katsuki struggled to find his voice, caught between shock and fear. Nizu grinned at Izuku before addressing Katsuki, confirming his identity and accusing him of bullying Izuku. Aizawa, visibly upset, stepped forward, wrapping Katsuki in his scarf and warning him about the consequences of his actions. Izuku interjected, suggesting they focus on more pressing matters, which Aizawa reluctantly accepted, though he promised to address Katsuki's behavior later. The class erupted in disbelief at Aizawa's revelation about Izuku's status as his unofficial son. Nizu quickly clarified Izuku's role in their investigation, explaining that he was assisting due to his impressive intellect. He informed the students that they would need to wear court-canceling cuffs during the inquiry to ensure fairness. Although some students were disappointed, Ida and Yaoyorozu encouraged everyone to cooperate, and they complied. Tsukachi began questioning each student to ascertain their innocence. By the end, Izuku, Nizu, and Aizawa apologized for the suspicion, but Ida and Kirishima assured them it was unnecessary. Katsuki muttered under his breath, earning disapproving looks from his classmates. Suddenly, the gym doors burst open, and a breathless Hawks entered, capturing the students' attention. He announced that he had found the lab they were searching for. Izuku and Tsukachi reacted with surprise, eager to hear more. Hawks explained how he had used tracking devices and mini-cameras to scout the area, revealing images of a shady warehouse filled with Nomu. The sight horrified the students, and Hawks emphasized the urgency of taking action before the lab became operational. Izuku nodded, contemplating the challenges ahead. He acknowledged that they needed to prepare for any guards and their quirks, as well as the possibility of the League of Villains intervening. Kirishima expressed concern about the limitations of Aizawa's quirk, wishing for a way to neutralize their opponent's powers. Inspired by this, Izuku quickly pulled out his phone and began messaging Power Loader, seeking assistance in their mission. What happened? Kitten mentioned nanotech, expressing urgency. Support King quickly agreed to help from his lab but then went offline. Kitten thanked everyone before logging off. Izuku excitedly embraced Kirishima, calling him a genius. Kirishima, taken aback, scratched his head in confusion. Izuku then grabbed Kigo's hand and dashed out of the room, leaving everyone, except Nizu, puzzled. Aizawa wondered if Izuku had discovered something significant, while Nizu chuckled, climbing onto Aizawa's shoulder. Tsukachi, observing the scene, simply sighed. Aizawa instructed everyone to return to their dorms, emphasizing the need for secrecy, especially from Class 1B, who had yet to be interrogated. A short time later, Izuku stood before Power Loader and his assistant, nervously confirming their plan to combine quirk canceller technology with nanotech. Both Power Loader and his assistant reacted with excitement, praising the idea. Aizawa, having just entered the room, was incredulous at the assistant's enthusiastic remarks about making babies with inventions. He activated his quirk, glaring at Hatsum Mei, who was oblivious to the misunderstanding. Power Loader clarified that Mei referred to her inventions as babies, prompting her to snap back to reality. Izuku and Kigo exchanged worried glances. Mei estimated they would need 3 days to complete the project if they worked together. Izuku eagerly agreed but indicated they had something important to address first. Tsukachi stepped forward to ask Mei a few questions, while she remained focused on preparing a blueprint. 2 days later, Tsukachi gathered a group of police officers for an urgent meeting. He explained the ongoing investigation into the USJ attack, highlighting the involvement of Nizu and Aizawa, as well as Izuku's contributions. He expressed the necessity of interrogating them, which caused murmurs among the officers. Nizu reassured them, taking responsibility for the decision. The officers reluctantly complied, and Tsukachi organized the interrogation process. As the officers entered the interrogation room, one questioned the need for court-canceling cuffs. Nizu explained that it was part of their investigation, assuring them there was nothing to worry about. However, one officer, clearly anxious, attempted to flee when the cuffs were brought out. Sansa intervened, and Izuku quickly subdued the officer, ensuring he was restrained. Tsukachi ordered the troublesome officer to be taken to another room for further questioning. After confirming that he was the only mole among them, the interrogation continued. In room number 9, Midnight and Hawks joined the trio as they confronted the captured officer, who refused to answer questions about his quirk. Frustrated, Izuku expressed his annoyance at the officer's silence. Midnight, leaning against the wall, wondered how they could get him to talk. Nizu, with a grin, suggested calling Yamada, piquing everyone's interest. The atmosphere in the room shifted as they awaited Yamada's arrival, each person contemplating the next steps in their investigation. "You are here because we need your help." The purple-haired teen with designer bags under his eyes blinked in confusion, unsure of how he could assist. Izuku tilted his head curiously and looked at Shinso, wondering about his quirk. The other teen froze, glancing at his hands on the table before mumbling that it was brainwashing. Izuku repeated the term, looking at Nizu before turning back to Shinso, eager to understand how it worked. Shinso explained that he needed a verbal response to activate his quirk, allowing him to command others. Izuku realized why Shinso might be apprehensive. People could easily misinterpret his ability as villainous. Aizawa, who had been listening, noted that they could use this to their advantage. Izuku, filled with excitement, exclaimed that Shinso's quirk was amazing and that he could become a great hero with it. Shinso, still hesitant, questioned the purpose of his presence, wanting to know who they were referring to and what he was supposed to do. Izuku quickly explained the situation, and Shinso nodded in a daze, expressing his doubt about making anyone talk. The others, except Nizu, looked surprised by his admission. Shinso clarified that his quirk only allowed him to control physical actions, not complex tasks like speaking or writing. Nizu chuckled, sharing that he had a plan in mind and wanted Izuku to understand Shinso's quirk before guessing what it was. He then instructed Shinso to use his quirk on Aizawa. Aizawa sighed but agreed, encouraging Shinso to proceed. With a gulp, Shinso stood and asked Aizawa about his hair color. Once under Shinso's control, Aizawa pointed to Izuku when instructed to identify the person who had been accidentally added to the group chat. Izuku realized the significance of this and mumbled about the subconscious, prompting Nizu to express his delight. Nizu then instructed Aizawa to resist answering the next question, and Shinso was given a phone to show Aizawa a collage of staff members. When asked who had stolen Aizawa's scarf, Aizawa pointed to Nemuri's picture, much to Izuku's excitement. After being released from control, Aizawa grumbled about his lack of control over his actions, leading Izuku to conclude that Shinso's quirk could override a person's brain. Nizu explained that Aizawa's subconscious memory allowed him to identify people even while under control. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized that their priority was not the traitor but the person who leaked information. Nizu emphasized the need to interrogate the leaker, leaving Aizawa and Hawks to handle that part. Izuku expressed his admiration for Nizu's cleverness, grateful for the insight. Later, as they prepared for the interrogation, Midnight instructed Shinso to act quickly after removing the cuffs from the suspect. Shinso took a deep breath, standing in front of the brunette and nervously nodding to Midnight. When the interrogation began, Shinso demanded to know the brunette's connection with the League. After a moment of silence, he pressed for an answer, and with a flick of a button, the cuffs loosened, causing the brunette to fall under Shinso's control. Izuku cheered for Shinso's success, impressed by his abilities. Tsukachi presented photos of villains, asking Shinso to identify who had leaked information about the USJ. The brunette's hand rose mechanically, pointing to a blonde woman, which relieved Tsukachi and excited Izuku. Shinso then inquired about the brunette's quirk, which the suspect confirmed as manipulation. During the next phase of the interrogation, Tsukachi confronted the blonde woman, demanding to know how she obtained information from UA. She denied any wrongdoing, but Aizawa calmly informed her that her friend in the force had revealed everything. Realizing she had inadvertently exposed herself, the blonde panicked. Hawks, leaning back in his chair, casually mentioned that her friend had faced severe consequences. Aizawa added that if she wanted to avoid a similar fate, she would need to cooperate. How could you do that? Tsukachi smiled at her nervousness, explaining that desperate times called for desperate measures. The woman froze in utter horror while the men congratulated themselves on their acting skills. Now, shall we begin? So her quirk is called Insight, Midnight Thought. She had stolen the information from Majima's memories when he was checking the USJ systems. What a hassle. At least they now understood how the information had leaked. Not only that, Izuku added excitedly, they even had the location of the base. Izuku marveled at the invention displayed on the large platform in Power Loader's lab. Mei bounced to his side, practically glowing with excitement, exclaiming how adorable the creations were. Izuku and Shinso exchanged wary glances, struggling to see the charm in the high-tech, sci-fi-looking devices. That aside, Izuku wondered who the purple-haired boy was. Upon realizing it was Shinso Hitoshi, he introduced him, noting his impressive quirk and how he had assisted with the investigation. Shinso rubbed his neck in embarrassment while Mei observed him with interest, commenting on his slender build. Suddenly she was behind him, playfully touching his biceps and shoulders, which made Shinso visibly uncomfortable. Mei, oblivious to the tension, announced that she was planning a new invention. Izuku sighed, explaining to Shinso that Mei referred to her creations as babies. Oh, Shinso replied, understanding dawning on him. Anyway, Mei suggested they test the drones, which made her leap away from Shinso and land in front of the table. The older heroes in the room, Aizawa, Hawks, Power Loader, and Nizu, shook their heads in amusement, with Nizu chuckling around his teacup. Mei opened a square box, revealing 2 sets of small discs the size of coins, a remote and a tab. She pointed to the discs, explaining they were quirk-canceling devices. The remote would control the drone, which she tapped, grinning. Unfortunately, she couldn't program the drone to specifically target villains, so it would launch the quirk cancelers at everyone in the room based on their heartbeat. Body heat was too risky, so she created special discs to differentiate between heroes and villains. They would automatically attach to the wearer's arm and would not fall off. Mei looked around, her grin widening as she asked Aizawa to step forward and activate his quirk. He complied, rubbing his face in resignation. Mei flicked a disc toward Aizawa's shoulder, and it latched onto his shirt. Suddenly his hair fell, and his eyes stopped glowing. The disc transformed, its appendages sinking into his skin painlessly and almost undetectably, providing a good window of opportunity before anyone realized what had happened. Izuku's eyes sparkled with admiration, amazed by Mei's quick work. Majima pouted, and Izuku chuckled, apologizing to Power Loader for the oversight. Aizawa mumbled that Mei was his daughter, earning a subtle glare from Majima, who ignored it in favor of ruffling his son's hair. Izuku examined the tab while Mei explained the controls. Hawks asked when they would attack, and Nizu clasped his paws together, looking at Aizawa. They would call for a meeting that evening, as it was better not to waste any more time. If the odds were in their favor, they would attack the next day. The other occupants nodded in agreement. Aizawa turned to the teens, reminding them to keep quiet. Shinso could tell them that Nizu was just joking, as some of his classmates had been pulled out of class for Nizu's amusement before. The scene shifted to the meeting, where the staff, including Hawks, MP Lady, Kamui Woods, Death Arms, and a few other heroes, gathered in the large meeting room of UA, an extension of Nizu's office. Lady voiced her confusion about the sudden meeting, prompting exchanges of glances among the others. The UA staff remained silent, following Nizu's instructions. Todoroki Enji expressed his frustration at the lack of notice, but Nizu's cold aura silenced the room as he entered, seated comfortably on Izuku's shoulder. Good evening, everyone, Nizu greeted once seated. Izuku took a place beside Aizawa and Hawks, while Mei sat beside Majima. Nizu apologized for the abrupt meeting, explaining that the situation was quite urgent. The heroes exchanged looks before focusing back on Nizu. He continued, explaining that the students of 1A and the staff had been attacked by a group known as the League of Villains at the USJ about a week ago. With the help of trusted allies, they had successfully discovered the League's base and the Noma lab. He gestured his paw towards Izuku, introducing him as Midoriya Izuku, his personal student who had played a pivotal role in the investigation. With Izuku's help, they had uncovered hidden aspects of the entire process with minimal risk. Endeavor grumbled, acknowledging the boy with a glare from the staff. Gang Orca frowned slightly and looked at Nizu, expressing his concern about the presence of 2 students in the meeting. He believed that discussions regarding a raid should be reserved for heroes only. Nizu understood his point but reiterated that Izuku had been crucial to the investigation and deserved to be present. He added that Hatsum Mei was the reason they had a working plan, as she had tirelessly collaborated with Majima to develop a reliable approach. The hero nodded, apologizing for his interruption. Nizu then asked Izuku to provide further details. The greenette stood up, and Aizawa clicked a button to activate the projector, which displayed a map. Izuku explained the details they had gathered so far, with occasional input from Tsukachi, Aizawa, and Hawks. Mei, along with Power Loader, demonstrated how her drone worked, leaving everyone in awe. Ryuku inquired about their plan. Nizu explained that it was straightforward yet effective. They would divide into 2 teams. Team A would attack the League's base, while Team B would take on the Nomu lab in Kamino Ward. Since the Nomu were artificially designed creatures capable of withstanding All Might's attacks, Team B would be led by All Might himself. Tsukachi and his team would remain on standby at both locations to apprehend the villains immediately. Nizu proceeded to assign the heroes to their respective teams. Team A consisted of Eraserhead, Hawks, Midnight, Snipe, Ectoplasm, Iwabami, 13, Vlad King, Kamui Woods, Death Arms, Edgeshot, and Ingenium. Team B included All Might, Endeavor, Bee Lady, Present Mike, Gang Orca, Ryuku, Fat Gum, Mirko, Cementos, Best Genist, and Gran Torino. All Might expressed surprise at Gran Torino's inclusion, but Nizu reassured everyone that Gran Torino was one of the best heroes available to assist them. Although the League was not a major threat at that moment, it was crucial to address them early on, and they needed as many heroes as possible to ensure nothing went wrong. Izuku looked at Nizu and insisted on joining the mission, stating that they needed someone to control the drone while the others fought. He was confident in his fighting abilities and assured them that he could defend himself. Aizawa was about to object when Nizu agreed to stay with Izuku, allowing them to improvise and assist each other if anything went awry. The sleep-deprived hero sighed, realizing there was no turning back now. Nizu grinned and clasped his paws, stating that they would attack when no one would expect them, in the early hours of the morning. As Team A gathered outside the League of Villains base, Izuku pointed to a nearby apartment complex under construction, explaining that he, Aizawa, and Nizu would wait there while the drone followed them inside. When the situation was favorable, he would launch the quirk-canceling devices. Aizawa expressed his confusion about Izuku's presence, believing Nizu could handle it alone. Izuku countered that he understood the plan better and emphasized the urgency of wrapping things up quickly, as the Nomu could not be dealt with by them alone. Hawks chimed in, agreeing that they needed to act immediately. Nizu noted that Shigaraki Tamura was rather childish and likely had no security systems in place, making it easier for them to enter, but he urged caution. Hawk's feathers returned to him as he examined the screen in his hands, noting the positions of the villains inside. Izuku instructed Kamui and Hawks to restrain the warp gate user and attach the quirk-canceling device to him. The others would break into the living room while Vlad King and Edgeshot kept an eye on the villains in the adjacent rooms. Midnight would use her quirk, so everyone needed to wear their masks. Eraserhead would temporarily erase the villains' quirks, and Izuku would launch the devices once everyone was in the hall. Eraserhead would maintain his quirk until the villains were restrained and secured with quirk-canceling cuffs and collars. Vlad King, Midnight, Snipe, and Ectoplasm would accompany them to the station while the rest moved toward Team B. With everyone confirming their readiness, Izuku instructed them to take their positions before Hawks lifted him and Nizu to drop them in the building. The heroes fastened their masks and hurried out. As the countdown began, Hawks and Kamui floated outside Kurogiri's room, where the warp gate user was asleep with the window slightly open. Vlad King and Edgeshot maintained a silent watch on Shigaraki and Toga, respectively. Aizawa and the rest of the team stood ready outside the living room windows and door, waiting for the signal. When the moment arrived, Izuku's voice called out to strike. The heroes broke in without hesitation, causing the villains to JRK awake. They took advantage of the initial confusion to put their plan into motion. In the room to the left, Hawks and Kamui barged in, waking Kurogiri from his slumber. Kurogiri was thoroughly confused as Kamui quickly used his branches to restrain him while Hawks attached quirk-canceling devices to Kurogiri's metal neck. Izuku had asked Mei to design special discs for Kurogiri since the warp gate user had no physical skin for the appendages to sink into. These new discs sent shocks across the metal base of Kurogiri's neck, effectively disabling his quirk. Hawk's eyes widened in alarm when a faint outline of a face appeared behind the flickering fog. But there was no time to ponder. The warp gate was successfully restrained, cutting off the convenient exit for the League. Hawks commanded that they needed to go, and Kamui extended his branches to further restrain the villain as the two heroes headed into the living room with Kurogiri. At the same time, Shigaraki and Toga jolted awake and stumbled into the living room, still dazed from sleep. Toga rubbed her eyes, asking what was going on. Edgeshot and Vlad took advantage of this moment, silently creeping behind them until they reached the living room and tackled them from behind. They couldn't use their quirks, nor could the heroes since Eraserhead was erasing them. However, the heroes had a physical advantage over the villains. Midnight released her quirk in the room while Izuku pressed the button on the remote. The quirk-canceling discs shot out of the drone and latched onto the villains, who were slowly succumbing to drowsiness. Dabi yelled in frustration, trying to shake Ingenium off him, while the elder Ida declared that Dabi was under arrest. Spinner punched Ectoplasm off of him, but Snipe quickly shot a bullet into Spinner's leg, causing him to fall back to the ground. Ectoplasm restrained him again while another of his clones helped the heroes secure the cuffs onto the villain's hands. Ryukyu raised her brow at twice, finding his split behavior both concerning and amusing. Uwabami knocked Dabi and Spinner unconscious, while Toga fell asleep due to the high concentration of Midnight's quirk. Shigaraki mumbled threats as he fell to his knees, overtaken by sleep. Cementos encased Mr. Compass's legs in cement while Aizawa tied his hands together with his scarf. Death Arms and 13 stood in the living room, ready to assist if anything unexpected occurred. Once the villains were restrained, Izuku squeaked in joy and hugged Nizu, exclaiming that they had finally taken down the League. Nizu confirmed their success, and Izuku pulled out his communicator to contact Tsukachi, reporting that the mission was successful. Tsukachi sighed in relief on the other end, confirming that they were on their way. Meanwhile, Uwabami, Ectoplasm, and Vlad searched the base for any useful information. Aizawa tied the villains to a pillar with his scarf, his eyes filled with indifference. However, something made his heart skip a beat. Kurogiri. Due to the quirk-canceling devices, his warp was fluctuating violently, and the sleep-deprived hero recognized hints of a familiar face appearing in fragments. The police arrived, and Hawks called for everyone to head to the lab. Aizawa reluctantly moved away from the villains after unbinding his scarf, relieved to see the officers already inside. Whatever had triggered his recollection of someone would have to wait. Izuku sighed in relief before realizing he needed to call All Might. He pressed the button to All Might's channel, asking for a status report. All Might responded that everything was surprisingly under control. Izuku was shocked, having expected a much more difficult situation. All Might explained that only 5 Nomu were active, and they had taken them down, while the others were still incomplete. Genist and Mirko had apprehended the scientist behind the experiments, who was currently unconscious. Nizu joined the conversation, asking if they had cut the power supply. All Might assured them that they had not, as MT Lady was about to, but Gran Torino had intervened. Izuku chuckled, recalling how Gran Torino had literally drop-kicked All Might into the wall earlier. Nizu grinned and suggested that Izuku inform Aizawa and Hawks before they left. Izuku nodded and switched channels, relaying the news that Team B had successfully taken down the lab, with only 5 Nomu active and the police having taken the villains and the scientist into custody. Hawks expressed hope for a total success, and a huge smile spread across Izuku's face as he confirmed it. Hawks instructed them to stay put while he came to get them. Izuku heard him yell that he would get there first, followed by Aizawa shouting incoherent words in the background. Izuku giggled and decided he might take a nap. Nizu chuckled and patted Izuku's hair with a satisfied smile, asking what was next. Izuku replied that they would focus on the hero commission. Both of the evil geniuses grinned mischievously, causing Hawks and Aizawa, who was hanging off Hawks's back with his scarf tied around him, to sweat drop. The heroes wrapped up their work and headed toward UA, ready for their next discussion. On Aizawa's command, Hawks carried a sleeping Izuku home and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, Inko opened the door and smiled at the two. She greeted Hawks and gently took her son into her arms. The hero was surprised by her strength, causing her to giggle at his reaction. Inko placed Izuku on the couch while Kigo stood behind her awkwardly. She turned to him, chuckling, and told him to sit down while she got him something to drink. Tea or coffee? Inko asked, her smile warm and inviting. The hero hesitated, knowing he had to leave soon for a meeting. He decided on coffee, hoping to keep the moment light. Inko's smile brightened even more. She gently reminded him not to call her ma'am, encouraging him to use a more familiar term like mom or mama if he felt comfortable. Hawk's eyes widened, and a huge smile spread across his face as he accepted this new closeness. Inko ruffled Hawks's hair affectionately before heading into the kitchen. He settled back on the sofa, feeling a sense of warmth wash over him. Izuku, who had been half asleep, giggled and remarked that the moment was enough to chase away his drowsiness. Hawks chuckled, inviting Izuku to join him on the sofa. The younger boy crawled over and curled up beside him, feeling safe under the protective wing of his older brother. They discussed the upcoming meeting, which was scheduled for 11 a.m., where Nizu intended to apologize to the locals for any disturbances. Izuku's wicked smile hinted at mischief, and Hawks felt a twinge of nervousness, knowing that his adorable little brother often had plans that could lead to trouble. Izuku mentioned needing to speak with Nizu, and as he dashed upstairs, Inko shook her head, wondering what he was up to. Hawks, rubbing his neck awkwardly, expressed his concern that whatever Izuku was planning might not be good. Inko handed Hawks a cup of coffee and set 2 more cups on the table for herself and Izuku. She inquired about the recent raid, and Hawks shared that it had gone better than expected. He felt a thrill in recounting his adventures, something he had longed to do. For the first time, he had someone to share his experiences with, and he wanted to make them proud. A few minutes later, Izuku returned with a mischievous grin that made both Inko and Hawks sweat with anticipation. Inko narrowed her eyes, asking what he was planning, but Izuku only giggled, leaving them both curious and excited about the impending surprise. Izuku mentioned that Nizu had asked him to be at UA by 7:30 a.m., and Hawks insisted on taking him, despite Izuku's reassurances that he would be fine on his own. Inko laughed, knowing how protective Aizawa was of Izuku, and encouraged them both to rest before the busy day ahead. Hawks promised to spend time with Inko once the day's events were over. At the press conference, Nizu welcomed everyone and introduced key figures involved in the recent hero activities, including Aizawa, All Might, and Hawks. He addressed the Kamino Ward incident, apologizing to the locals for the disturbance. With the help of other pro-heroes and the police, they had successfully apprehended the League of Villains, the same group responsible for the earlier attack on Class 1A. Detective Tsukachi provided background on the League, revealing their connection to the notorious villain All for One. He explained how they had tracked down the League's base and the Nomu Lab, leading to a coordinated ambush by 2 teams of heroes and police. The operation had been a success, and those responsible were now in custody. As the conference continued, a member of the audience raised his hand, ready to ask questions about the events that had unfolded. What was the purpose behind the League's attack on the USJ? Nizu smiled and chose to answer the question. As of now, they weren't sure of the motive behind the attack, but they were determined to find out after questioning the League. Julia from International News raised a concern about how the League discovered the location and schedule of the USJ, which was supposed to be top secret. She speculated whether there might be an insider involved. Nizu interrupted her, expressing understanding but urging her not to voice such suspicions about the UA family, including the staff or students. He emphasized that everyone at UA was loyal to the organization and its values. However, as heroes, they could not overlook any possibility. Necessary measures had been taken, and he assured everyone that none of them were under suspicion. He requested that any rumors that could potentially harm their children be put to rest, expressing immense faith in their fraternity. No one missed the subtle warning in Nizu's words and decided to let him move on to the next topic. He announced to the world that the Japanese Hero Commission was corrupted to the core. Gasps echoed around the room while Aizawa smirked. Hawks stared at the scene with a nonchalant demeanor, though he was clearly excited for what was about to unfold. Someone in the audience demanded to know what Nizu meant by that. The Chimera grinned and explained that he had come across several suspicious accounts that made him keep an eye on the commission, which he found disappointing. He listed issues such as corruption, child abuse, unreasonable standards, discrimination, and illegal business dealings involving both heroes and villains. He reassured the audience that these claims were backed by evidence. In the control room, Izuku smirked as he loaded videos into the main system. Ever since they learned about Hawks, Nizu had sought ways to collect evidence. He had hacked into servers and obtained CCTV footage of the harsh training and abuse Hawks endured. His file, Project Red Wing, was also compromised by Nizu. The footage from various cameras revealed suspicious activities, prompting further investigation. Inko had sent him a detailed analysis of hero laws that could aid the investigation. Nizu and Aizawa felt proud of their mentee, impressed by how well Izuku understood the public's mindset. Hawks was beloved by many, from children to the elderly, and had a significant impact on teens and young adults aspiring to become heroes. Izuku realized that once the evidence was presented, the fanbase would rally to support Hawks. The Hero Commission would struggle to counter the unexpected attack without facing public backlash. By the time the Commission recognized the attack, the evidence would already be widespread. No matter what actions they took to suppress it, the people would already be aware. Nizu was a trusted source of genuine information, and if he issued such a controversial statement, people would believe it. Izuku understood sentiments better than anyone, which was why he had insisted that All Might attend the meeting, even though he wasn't needed. All Might was known as the symbol of peace and the #1 hero, and his mere presence would carry significant weight with the masses. If All Might remained silent, it would be seen as validation of the claims. The commission had nowhere to run. True to his assumptions, no one questioned the evidence presented. Within minutes, chaos erupted across Japan. Hawks testified that he had been treated like a weapon rather than a child. A large crowd gathered outside the commission's headquarters, protesting and expressing their outrage. Izuku, Nizu, Hawks, and Aizawa could barely contain their smirks. Aizawa commanded the audience to settle down, activating his quirk, and silence fell over the room. Nizu smiled and clasped his paws, noting that the chairman of the commission was being appointed unfairly. Individuals without proper qualifications and fair voting were being given authority, leading to the commission's downfall. He explained that, according to established rules, the chairman must be chosen through voting, with the top 10 heroes and commission members representing candidates for public vote. This process had ceased decades ago, and the current chairman had held the position for over 8 years, despite the requirement for a new appointment every 5 years. Murmurs erupted from the audience as they began to realize the gravity of the situation. The heroes had already unanimously decided on their candidate. When someone asked who it was, all the heroes present smirked triumphantly while Izuku cackled with glee. Midoriya Inko, Nizu announced. Elsewhere, a green-haired woman dropped the stack of plates in her arms and fainted. In another part of the hall, Todoroki Enji expressed his disbelief, questioning who Midoriya Inko was and why he hadn't given his vote. Midnight remarked that his opinion was irrelevant, while Cementos added that he had not been asked or informed about it. I'm the number 2 hero dash. Not for long. The flame hero looked at Nizu in shock, wondering what he meant. Nizu smiled sweetly and patted a file lying on the table, explaining that they had some very important matters to discuss. Ryukyu interjected, expressing her awareness that Nizu had chosen Midoriya Inko as their representative. She acknowledged that while they had left the choice up to him, she was curious about who Inko was. From the vague details she had, she knew Inko was a lawyer, but she had not heard of her before. Ryukyu expressed her trust in Inko's capability to handle the situation. Nizu sipped his tea and grinned, confirming that Midoriya Inko was indeed a talented lawyer who fought against quirk discrimination. He noted that her knowledge of quirk laws and general norms was almost on par with his own. Additionally, he mentioned that she was a good person who had indirectly helped them with many matters, which was why he had nominated her. The others in the room nodded in agreement. Nizu opened the file and smirked at Endeavor, stating that they needed to discuss a few issues that required urgent resolution. He had invited Midoriya Inko herself to assist them. Just then, Inko entered the room, dressed in professional attire with her hair neatly tied in a bun. She took a seat beside Nizu and greeted everyone with a smile, introducing herself and expressing her gratitude for their support. The heroes smiled back at her and turned to Nizu for him to continue. The Chimera flipped through the pages of the file and cleared his throat. He explained that they needed to amend the quirk laws and take action against quirk discrimination. The UA entrance exam pattern also required modification to allow every student with potential to enter the hero course. Several parameters needed to be considered to ensure that future heroes were reliable and incorrupt. Additionally, a team must be deployed to monitor existing institutions for quirkist behavior. Miruko raised her hand, interrupting Nizu to express her concern about planning all of this before the polls were out. She acknowledged that he had discussions with the commission, which had been displeased. She questioned how he could be so certain that Midoriya would win. Nizu thanked her for the question and admitted he was slightly uncertain about the poll's outcome. However, he believed that the public's lingering bitterness and distrust toward the existing commission would work in their favor. He mentioned that All Might, Hawks, and himself had vouched for Midoriya, which gave him confidence in their victory. He was planning these changes in advance so that when Midoriya was given the position, they could assure the public of their commitment to change. Inko cleared her throat and pulled out another file, sharing her experiences as a lawyer fighting against quirk discrimination. She described it as a lonely battle that had given her insight into the state of affairs. Despite taking on several cases, only a few had been successful due to the bias favoring those with powerful quirks. She shared her personal story about her son, who was quirkless and had faced discrimination in school. The courts had disregarded her pleas against the school, which had a strong reputation. This issue was prevalent worldwide, and she expressed her frustration over how individuals with so-called weak or villainous quirks were often dehumanized. The rising suicide rates among bullied children were a tragic reality that authorities seemed to ignore. Inko's goal was to create a society where everyone was treated equally, regardless of their quirks. Iwabumi remarked on how amazing her vision was, and the others nodded in agreement. The meeting with the heroes continued for an hour before they were dismissed, except for Endeavor, who was asked to stay behind. Inko smiled at him, warning him to watch his tone. Endeavor, feeling challenged, questioned why he should be afraid of her. Inko's response was calm but firm, reminding him that she knew the history of his abusive actions and the toll they had taken on his family. She pointed out that his behavior had contributed to his wife's mental health issues and that he had hidden significant collateral damage from the public. She noted that his obsession with creating the perfect weapon had led to serious consequences, including the potential loss of his hero license. Endeavor felt a chill at her words, realizing that she had concrete evidence against him. Inko slyly asked if he had anything to say for himself. For once, Endeavor chose silence. Inko presented him with two options. He could either admit his faults on live television, lose his license, and serve time in prison, or he could give up custody of his youngest son to someone he wanted, help his wife out of the mental institution, contribute 50% of his wealth for public welfare, take on minor missions without pay, and complete 10 years of community service. He would also need to attend therapy twice a month and abandon his obsession. If he chose the second option, he could keep his position and hero license. The choice was his. The only reason they were providing a second option was due to the public's growing distrust and chaos. The incident with the commission had shaken their faith, and if his crimes were revealed, they would lose the little trust they had left in the heroes. As the number 2 hero, it was time for him to take responsibility. Nizu explained that if he chose the second option but failed to comply with the conditions, they would be forced to reveal his true nature to the world. The flame hero felt a lump in his throat. After a moment of contemplation, Endeavor sighed and asked for the papers. Inko smirked as she opened her briefcase to retrieve the documents. He read through the conditions carefully before signing. Inko noted that they had a deal and emphasized the importance of adhering to the conditions. She warned him that he was not in the clear yet. This was just the beginning of his struggles. He had brought this upon himself, and now he would have to face the consequences. They would monitor him closely, and even one mistake could cost him everything. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Endeavor stormed out of the room. Inko and Nizu exchanged satisfied glances, knowing that the world was about to undergo significant changes. A decade later, Midoriya Inko was re-elected as chairman due to the positive changes she had implemented. Strict anti-bullying policies were enforced nationwide, and a dedicated branch was established to monitor compliance. UA accepted all worthy students into the hero course after they were certified by Aizawa, Hawks, and Nizu. Endeavor was under constant watch but had shown considerable improvement. His pay was reinstated, though he was no longer the number 2 hero. Todoroki Tuya returned to his family after serving his sentence, while others were taken in by UA for rehabilitation. Shigaraki and Toga chose to become heroes, while the rest decided to work as staff at UA. Many remarkable heroes emerged as a result of Inko's reforms, and the hero ranking system underwent significant changes, with Sun Eater becoming the current number 1 hero. All Might, encouraged by many, received advanced medical treatment that greatly improved his health. One for All was a complex topic, as those deemed worthy had rejected the quirk. However, All Might's improved health allowed him to focus on the next generation of heroes. After careful consideration, the young girl they had rescued from the Yakuza was chosen as the 9th wielder of One for All. 17-year-old Midoriya Eri, adopted by the Midoriyas, possessed the original quirk Rewind, which, when paired with One for All, made her the most powerful teenager in existence. Hatsum May had risen to become the top businessperson in the world with her venture, Hatsum Industries. Shinso Hitoshi became the number 2 underground hero, as Aizawa had not yet retired. Shudo became the number 3 hero and chose Aizawa as his legal guardian. As for Izuku, a young boy hushed his noisy classmate, reminding everyone that it was time for the orientation. Another boy eagerly anticipated the arrival of their instructor, while a girl expressed her excitement about personal classes every week. The hall fell silent as a tall man with green hair, dressed in a black tuxedo, walked onto the dais with a warm smile. He stood at the podium and introduced himself as Viridian, the number 5 pro hero and their principal. He welcomed them to the greatest hero school, where their dreams could become a reality.